The sound of a piano rings in your ears as you have entered Sinnoh. Its intensity being one you will never forget, you bear witness to a land of chaos. Sharks flying faster than a stealth bomber. There are 4-foot-tall bees, the trees wiggle, and the plants will eat you. So yeah, the ecosystem is a bit wild. So how does it function? Well, I have once again scoured every single route, turned every stone, and scuba'd every water to bring to you the most accurate and realistic Complete Sinnoh Ecosystem. Howdy there, I'm Acrylic, and let's break down the guideline first before we get into the nitty-gritty main topic, because the goal is always to ensure that I keep this as loyal to the Pokemon world as much as possible, while also being as realistic as possible. We will be going route by route, taking stops into caves or special locations along the way that are not man-made, with very few exceptions. We want naturally occurring daily encounters, so special events such as swarms, or you have to have the leaf green or fire red cartridge in the bottom, will not be considered, in addition to those swarms not occurring until after the national dex is actually obtained, and I will not be including honey trees. The reason for that is that the Pokemon in them do not occur often enough for us to actually consider them part of the normal ecosystem in those areas. At least theoretically speaking. Also, it just complicates things if I keep those in a way that is not worthwhile, as we get a lot of these similar encounters across the board for those. And don't worry, those Pokemon will get covered in future editions. Now, this also means I am taking Generation 4 data from the Diamond, Pearl, Platinum games, and I am not taking the remakes information. Nothing against the remakes, I just want the regions to be as they were originally intended. Now, we do have time once more with the day and night cycles, thank you Dialga. So I will talk about when Pokemon appear throughout the day, morning, night, whatever it might be, and sometimes talk about their encounter rates as they give a rough estimate of how many there might be, but not exact amounts. Speaking of Pokemon, I will read out their known information, and if it doesn't state their diet, then we will look at their real-life inspirations to help determine that diet while looking at other Pokemon that are on the route. And to streamline this video, for any Pokemon that I have covered in previous editions of the Ecology series, I will quickly recap their info rather than read everything, so that way you know what the diet is without having to watch those other videos, but you definitely should watch them. It supports the channel. For fishing, as always, we are only going to include the Pokemon whose levels fall within a level range completely found of those within the grass encounters. The reason for this is the fact that between the old rod and the super rod, it completely skews the encounter rates, and while that can be explained by a heavier lure, I'd rather not be talking about Gyarados on a super early route in a puddle. Now, of course, some Pokemon are not found naturally in the wild, whether that be because we just simply do not run into them, they run off, they exist in areas that we cannot reach, whatever it might be. As such, they're just not going to be included in this edition. That includes our starter Pokemon and Pokemon such as Clefable. Despite Cleffa and Clefairy being available and encounterable, Clefable is nowhere to be found and can only be obtained through evolution. As such, we're not talking about Clefable. Again, amongst many others. Finally, for some routes, I will paint you a beautiful little picture with my words to give you a strong idea and visual of how the route really works and really make it a nice, cohesive idea. Now, let's get into the environment and climate of Sinnoh in order to set the stage. Sinnoh features a broad range of new and classic environments for the player to explore, including, for the first time in a Pokemon RPG, snowy routes. Its terrain is varied. Some parts of the region are dry and mountainous, others are wet and swampy. The region is rich in water, but not as rich as Hoenn. Due to its large size, the main region of Sinnoh can be broken into two subregions divided by Mount Coronet, roughly comparable to how the continent that Kanto and Johto make up is essentially a contiguous region. The western half of Sinnoh features a variety of landscapes. Its coasts are notably more rocky than the eastern half, however, the land is far more fertile, and the towns, for the most part, are rural. A windswept canyon, carved out by a river that flows from Mount Coronet, is home to the Valley Windworks, which provides clean, wind-driven electricity to the nearby towns. This is not to say, however, that there is no importance to West Sinnoh, as Oreburgh City, Eterna City, and Kanalev City are the locations of Pokemon gyms, and Jubilife City, At the heart of the area is the most technologically advanced city in the region. Now, even though, again, I'm keeping this focus more towards environment and the ecosystem, basically how Pokemon interact with the environment, how the environment is affected by them, and how the Pokemon interact with each other, because that's ecology, we still have to take in mind some of the human influences that have occurred, because there are Pokemon that like to be in urban environments and are around those environments, only on the routes near those larger cities. Unlike the halves of Sinnoh, divided longitudinally by Mount Coronet, the northern area is sparsely populated, with Snow Point City as the only major area. This is likely due to the cold climate and snowy terrain in the area. Despite this relative isolation, however, Snow Point has a Pokemon gym, making it another important stop for trainers who wish to compete in the Pokemon League. The climate of Sinnoh varies widely, and most of the region is made of mountainous or hilly areas. Unlike Hoenn, which is located in the south where the climate is warmer, Sinnoh is located on the northern boundaries of the world where the temperature is cooler. It is so cold in the northern part of the region that snow falls constantly. The harsh snow that blows down from the mountain's peaks not only makes the area very cold, but makes the routes in the area perilous to travel on. Cities, such as Snow Point City, are completely covered in snow, and Pokemon who live nearby have had to adapt to the climate. Recently, the southern side of the region has also become cooler. Climate change is taking a toll. Areas such as Twin Leaf Town and Route 201 now have small amounts of snow on the ground. However, not all northern areas of Sinnoh are covered in snow. Due to the dry environments and mountainous areas such as Stark Mountain, the small island known as the Battle Zone is subject to warmer climates. A constant sandstorm rages on 228 due to the flow of the wind down through the mountains, and some of the southern areas of the Battle Zone are very tropical and contain dense jungles. The mainland features full land geography with only 5 water routes. Despite this lack of water routes, in contrast to the Hoenn region, Sinnoh is known to be rich in water. Rivers that originate from the highlands and mountains in the center of the landmass runs through the region, passing many cities, towns, and routes, and down into the ocean. There are many lakes throughout the region, such as Lake Acuity, Lake Valor, and Lake Verity. All these factors create a tropical climate throughout the mainland. Many large cities settle on or close to the seaside. Some of them even have large ports. Further inland, there are many different climates. Due to the mountain zones, different inland areas are subject to rain. This rain creates wetlands. Such areas may also be covered partially or completely by shallow pools of water. The soil in the wetland area is permanently saturated with moisture, which creates swamps, marshes, and bogs. In fact, Pastoria City was founded on marshy soils that attracted wild Pokemon. Unlike other regions, though, Sinnoh is sometimes troubled by fog. Route 210 is often covered in a thick fog cloud that makes obstacles and trainers difficult to see. Fortunately for travelers, this can be easily cleared, as long as you have defog. Now let's begin with Route 201, a small path through a lush green wooded area. The densely grown trees give off a thick aroma. First up in the morning, we find a small population playing us songs to wake up as we find Kricketot. By shaking its head and rubbing its antennae together, Kricketot is able to create a sound similar to a xylophone or marimba that it uses to communicate with others of its kind. Kricketot are known to gather in greater numbers during autumn nights. I have known this Pokemon my entire life, like half of my life, and I always imagined that the sounds it made were similar to that of like a harp or a violin, mainly because of Cricketune, yet I never knew that Kricketot would make the same sounds as a marimba, and I can hear it in my head and I love it so much. Though, all this tells us nothing about its diet, so let's consult natureinflight.com. As they say, crickets will eat various parts of plants, including leaves, stems, and flowers, and those plants provide them with essential nutrients and energy for growth and reproduction. They also eat fruits, ripe or decaying, berries or apples. They eat the soft flesh, which provides them with natural sugars. They'll eat vegetables, lettuce, carrots, and potatoes, offer an array of vitamins and minerals that are viable for them. Okay, that's fine. This is okay. They'll eat seeds, a good source of protein and healthy fats, helps repair body tissues, dead insects. Crickets are scavengers too. Who would have guessed? Pretty much almost, I don't want to make the generalization that every insect is a scavenger of sorts, but there are so many insects that, I mean, they are our cleaners. Many of them are just our cleaners anyway and are vital to our ecosystems. And this is where cricket's hut begins to sound a little bit more devious, as they will also eat small, live insects. Crickets are also predators. They hunt and feed on smaller insects such as aphids, caterpillars, and mosquito larvae. Preying on live insects gives crickets a fresh source of protein and other essential nutrients. Just wanted to quote that directly. And finally, they also eat microorganisms, fungi, algae, bacteria found on decaying organic matter. So, for clarification's sake, this does vary from cricket to cricket, as we can assume cricket tot is not actually actively going after other insects currently. But later, when we talk about cricket toon, we might have a different story. As such, our skittish little tot here is going to be a great decomposer and herbivore that might eat other insect Pokemon. They also disappear once the midday happens. The next Pokemon we find here roughly 40% of the time during the morning, and it increases in numbers during the day as we get to talk about our Lord and Savior Bidoof. Bidoof is a brown, rodent-like Pokemon with 4 short legs. Protruding from Bidoof's upper jaw are large incisors, which it uses for gnawing on wood and rocks. These teeth grow constantly, so this Pokemon needs to gnaw on hard substances to keep them ground down. The growth rate of Bidoof's teeth is similar to that of a Rattata's. This Pokemon can be found nesting in groups near bodies of water, usually building a nest of dams to live in. It is also known to wander into villages, gnawing on people's houses. Despite its stout body and naive appearance, this Pokemon can be agile and is not easily perturbed. And I have to always say I love Bidoof's, like, the whole video that they did on Bidoof. And everyone memed the heck out of this Staravia shot. It's so beautiful, and now I need to go watch that little short again. Now, despite being called the plump mouse Pokemon, it is very clearly a beaver in habits and overall appearance, coloration, you name it. As such, according to GrandCanyonTrust.org, all studies agreed that beaver are fastidious generalists, Olsen and Hubert, 1994, capable of consuming a wide array of vegetal species, yet demonstrating preference for some species over others, depending on what is available in their habitats. In other words, they are willing to eat any tree, for the most part, sapling, so on and so forth, but have preferences as to what wood and leafy parts that they do actually enjoy eating, and which ones that they prefer to build with instead. And beavers are actually incredibly important because they increase tree diversity. Basically, if they're going to be choosing between trees, it allows that tree to die and a new, possibly even different tree to grow in their place. That's incredibly important, as I'm going to take a small tangent here. Tree diversity ensures that disease does not run rampant. In Wisconsin, the Dutch elm disease absolutely decimated the, Dutch elms that existed, as the streets were lined with this one singular tree up and down the blocks everywhere because people thought they were beautiful. Well, when a disease came in, guess what just completely wiped out all of that beauty? And tree diversification would have helped with that. So that's also incredibly important in nature because that will ruin habitats if you don't have it and something happens. Now, beavers also will increase water quality and through the diversity are able to benefit other creatures such as fish and other mammals who, again, enjoy those different trees. It makes sense that we would find them here in the forest close to an area with a water source, the lake, of course. The last of the 3 here is actually Starly. Starly's small wings are powerful enough to leave foes with an injury that can last for a week. I don't get smacked by a bird. I've been smacked by a bird's wings. I used to have birds, and when you first hold them, sometimes they're real happy. Other times they're not, and they will buffet you with their wings and just bah bah bah. And it just doesn't feel good, but I can't imagine Starly. Oh, it is a large bird, never mind. However, although capable of flapping its wings powerfully, Starly is weak and inconspicuous when alone. Starly congregates in mountains and fields, forming large flocks to protect itself. However, individuals will begin to bicker if the group becomes too large. This Pokemon's cry is harsh, and its singing can become annoying. That's very mean. I disagree. I do like Starly's little chip tune that it has going on. It preys on small bug Pokemon and Cherubi's nutrient-rich second head. As depicted in The Lonely Snover, it has also been seen consuming the acorn-like berries grown on the bushes of Grotle. So, Starly's fairly easy. It is eating bugs, it's eating berries. That might change as it gets older. Also, I'm pretty sure Cherubi losing its second vestigial head would actually cause it to die, because that has nutrients that are essential to ensure that Cherubi grows up and evolves, despite it, whatever the game says it evolves by. And as day turns to night, we see less Starly and more Bidoof. Though this is not to say that they are awake, we are likely just stumbling onto their sleepy selves. This also means that our first route is plenty easy. Our Bidoof are grazing through the area as they please, wandering in and out of the nearby lake. Kricketot tries to stay a bit quieter in the area while eating their own fill during the morning when there are less Starly, which are watching from the nearby tree line, waiting for the slightest movement, then striking down upon the Cricketots in order to earn their meal for the day. Though their population would not be this large if they were purely relying on the Kricketot as a meal, so the Starly are clearly eating plenty of berries as well. And with that, the first of many routes are closed, and we move on. But before we do, I just want to thank you for watching this video. If you have enjoyed this so far, please support the channel any way you can. Subscribe, share the videos, go watch other videos after this one, and if you want to go the extra mile, which would blow me away, become a member of the channel for $3 a month. That goes an incredibly long way, as with more members, it just ensures that I can continue this channel and put in the quality that you deserve and I genuinely want to give, because I love doing this. You also get some benefits from it, so go read up on those and enjoy. Otherwise, thank you so much for your time, and let's continue on to our main topic. Lake Verity does not have any encounters, though it is important to note since it does serve as the home of Mesprit. Our legendary Lake Guardians, or if we go by their direct translation, the gods of emotion, intelligence, and willpower, we know that they don't interact with the world directly, but are incredibly important to humanity as they granted their namesake domains to the humans. If you want to hear more about the legendary mythical family tree, I do have an entire 8-hour video explaining that, so go check that out and take it at piecemeal. It is sectioned into chapters. Route 202. A winding path that twists through grassy fields. Young trainers like to test their battle skills here. We see Starly, Bidoof, and Kricketot once more, but we introduce a predator to the mix now, as we find at all hours, Shinx. The electricity is produced by the extension and contraction of muscles in Shinx's forelegs, which causes this Pokemon's fur to glow. If it senses danger, its fur can gleam brightly to blind predators so it can flee. Excited trembling is a sign that Shinx is generating tremendous amounts of electricity. It can send signals to other Shinx by shining the tip of its tail and shaking it. It has an aggressive nature, thus taming a Shinx is said to take great patience. As mentioned in Pokemon Sleep, Shinx can create electricity when it rolls around while asleep, and on rare occasions, a sleeping Shinx releases discharge sparks. I feel like that's a common thing that you'd run into with a lot of Pokemon that are young. Random fire blast, random electricity, random water blast. The insurance in this world has to be skyrocketed. While it can be considered a lion cub, it is actually more similar to a lynx in nature and name. Its ear tufts, and I would also argue its fur composition. And so we consult National Geographic for their diet, as lynx are skilled hunters due to their great hearing and eyesight that is so strong they can spot a mouse 250 feet away. They tend to live in dense forests where there is plenty of cover to ambush their prey. Lynx aren't able to keep up the chase over long distances, so once they've spotted their prey, they'll silently stalk it until the perfect moment. Pouncing, they grasp their victim with their front claws and kill it with a bite to the throat. Seems very similar to Shinx being very active with those front paws. These stealthy cats avoid humans and hunt at night, so they are rarely seen. Okay, that one's not like Shinx. They usually target one primary prey. For Canada lynx, that's the snowshoe hare, and for the Iberian lynx, it's the European rabbit. Meanwhile, bobcats have a more varied diet of rabbits, hares, rodents, and sometimes birds, while the larger Eurasian lynx hunts deer and other small animals. They also take 2,000-mile treks, but why is an incredible mystery. They have been known to kill farm animals such as sheep and goats, particularly when the livestock is left to graze near the edge of a forest. In Norway, the government compensates farmers for the 10,000 or so sheep that are lost to lynx every year. Despite Mareep not being in this region, I will love to see a Shinx and a Mareep in the same environment, not because I don't like Mareep. I actually love Mareep and that entire line. It's one of my favorite electric type lines. But these two could clearly have a relationship in nature together. I mean, a predatory-prey relationship, but you get it. Now, to confirm a more specific diet, I was able to read up through woodlandtrust.org.uk, and the diet ranges between birds to deer, foxes, and more. Not bugs, not fish. Though this is not to say this is out of the question, as any creature, when desperate, will eat anything, and I would not be surprised if Shinx did eat fish. So, yes, despite how cute it is, Shinx is even more efficient of a hunter with the power of electricity on its side. This makes beed've and Starly perfect targets, and Shinx would be incredibly efficient at this as well. It could chase down a target with little to no risk, as just normal muscle movement is what helps generate its electricity, meaning that it gets an extra boost of power. It's like a self-generating engine. Shinx moves, electricity is generated, and the electricity gives Shinx energy to move more until it releases a shocking strike. Truly a marvel. Route 203. Despite being so close to a big town, this path retains its relaxed, natural atmosphere. Once one gets through the tunnel, the city of Orberg is just a stone's throw away. Woo, boy! Okay, this seems like a lot on the surface if you are following along at all through Bulbapedia or anything else for the routes, but it is actually nothing too crazy. There are some Magikarp who are partially within range, who are just bottom feeders. In the morning, there are Kricketot. All times a day, we will find Abra, who only eat berries and teleport away when they sense danger, making it a non-contender in this route and many others. And then we have beed've, Shinx, Starly, all back, and at night we do find Zubat here, which they will be taking blood from any Pokemon that it can. And is honestly the only new one that's truly interacting here, unless some of our Pokemon, i.e. Shinx only, is going after Magikarp. In addition, Shinx very well might just strike down a Zubat for a snack, I don't know how good they taste, and eat one of them. So, again, with nothing too crazy to talk about here, we're going to move on to the next route. Route 204. A charming natural path that wanders past many ponds and groves of trees. The Ravaged path was hewn through a rocky outcropping. It is a shortcut that leads straight to Florima Town, and, same as before, we get rid of Abra, throw in a Wurmple for the birds to eat, and then we get one of the shortest grass types in all of Pokemon, beed've. beed've keeps its buds closed during the winter, but opens them again in the spring and releases poisonous pollen. The pollen it scatters induces harsh sneezing and runny noses, and is more toxic depending on how clean the water it was fed with was. Basically, the cleaner the water, the less poisonous. beed've's bud beginning to open is seen as an imminent arrival of spring. It lives near clean pools and ponds. So again, as long as we make sure the water is clean, beed've is not dangerous, though it will still likely release toxic pollen if it really wants to in order to defend itself. It will be susceptible to a couple of Pokemon here, such as Starly and Kricketot, and we actually would see beed've also go after beed've, as beed've is a pure normal type at the current juncture. Though it seems in this route, the one benefiting the most from all the plants and bugs would actually be Starly, as it has the highest population when compared to any other Pokemon on this route. And that is actually incredibly important when we talk about evolutions later on. Now, there is a location that we will come back to off of this route later, as we are first going to talk about Route 205. A quietly following stream and hilly terrain with one-way ledges makes this a fun area for adventure. Near the entrance of the Eternal Forest is a cavern whose keepers offer rest to weary travelers that stop by, and a wide wooden walkway spans a large pond, where fishermen idle their time away dangling lines from the walkway. Now, a small population of Bidoof are here alongside Magikarp in the water, though we do have a slew of new Pokemon between the southern and northern side. Now, I will be sure to paint a picture at the end of this route with so many Pokemon here, though I will have to mention Eternal Forest since it actually separates the two sections. First up on our southern side, we have our little squirrel Pachirisu, which I love the shiny of. It's like a perfect little strawberry pink. Its tail is almost as big as its body, with 3 spikes at the top of the curl, which it can use to shoot charges. Though its arms and legs are very short, it can run incredibly fast, enabling it to tire pursuing Pokemon out quickly. I kind of imagine it like the Velma Dinkley, you know, a pup named Scooby-Doo. Or even like the Mr. Krabs. Aren't they both the same sound? It has a great amount of electricity following within its body. If it builds up enough charge, it may shock other Pokemon, and it is related to the Pikachu line. When it sleeps, it likes to curl its big fluffy tail around the front of its body and uses it as a pillow. It also likes to chase and groom its tail. When a Pachirisu sheds its fur, it shapes them into fur balls, which have static charges just like its fur. It hides its favorite foods, which mainly consist of berries, in these static puffs and stores them in tree holes. Why does everything this Pachirisu does paint such a vivid picture in my mind that is incredibly cute? Can this thing stop being so cute? I don't know. I don't want it to stop, but it is just adorable. It does this to protect the food. If a human or another Pokemon tries to take it, they will actually get shocked by the static in the leftover fur. It may rub cheek pouches with another Pachirisu to share stored electricity. It is generally found in treetops in forests, as well as the outskirts of a forest and near power plants. So Pachirisu are social and good at running away from predators while defending themselves. In addition, it is an herbivore, though there is more to its tail than what is being said. Squirrel tails are actually used for balance, thermal regulation, protecting themselves from harsh sunlight, rain, or snow, and assistance with swimming, communication, and even intimidation. It is an incredibly important part of a squirrel's body. So you can imagine, with such a large tail, Pachirisu is able to really amplify the abilities. Next up, though, we do have our West Sea Shellos specifically. The West Sea form's underside is white, mantle is pink, and there are several small spike-like protrusions on its back. On its head is a ring of pink, fleshy knobs, resembling the gills of a nudibranch. West Sea Shellos' appearance is theorized to have been influenced by warm ocean waters. The East Sea form, meanwhile, sports a green underside and a turquoise mantle. 2 yellow-lined flap-like protrusions resembling serrata are present along its back. On its head are 2 white-tipped tentacles resembling rhinophores, that extend away from its face. East Sea Shellos' appearance is theorized to have been influenced by cold ocean waters. Now, Shellos live along seashores. Its color becomes more vibrant the better quality of the waters it lives in. It is also believed that Shellos' diet, which consists of plankton, also influences its form, but this has yet to be, proven. Though, once again, we have plankton, microorganisms within the Pokemon world, yet we don't have a single visual for them. Are they the same as ours? Are they different? Are they more Pokemon? I don't know. And not knowing is what drives me crazy, because I can't study it if it doesn't tell me anything whatsoever. If I don't find out by the time that I die one day, I'm going to be very upset in the afterlife. The physical differences between both forms seems to be entirely cosmetic, so there are also no significant changes in capabilities that have been observed. While it can travel on land, it can only stay there on the shore for a limited time before its skin dries out. When Shellos' squishy body is pressed or squeezed, or when a Shellos senses imminent danger, a mysterious purple liquid, theorized to be a kind of stress-induced greasy sweat, will ooze out of its body. This fluid is a defense mechanism against enemies. Although harmless, it is very sticky and hard to wash off. That makes Shellos sound like a really cute but weird sponge. CHAOSS has a friendly disposition and is said to have great regenerative capabilities. In the animated series, West Sea CHAOSS can extend their necks to incredible lengths. It is unknown if the East Sea form can do this as well. This species once had a shell on its back long ago, and it's considered a close relative to Pokemon such as Shelter. Very rarely do we get, like, actual confirmation of relation between, like, otherwise visually unrelated species, so that's actually a shocker. And we need... Wait, hold on. We went as far back as Hisui, and we did not see a shell on this thing. We better get to go even further back one day and see full CHAOSS shell. I want that. What if it's anything like Lapras? Oh, God. Okay, I just had to look at Lapras's information just to double confirm that Lapras says nothing about being related to Shelter, Cloyster, or these guys. But we don't know. We don't know. The Nurse Joy featured in Gateway to Ruin revealed Mount Coronet's formation led to an allopatric speciation event in which the original population of CHAOSS was separated into two. As a result, CHAOSS's color and other physical aspects began to vary due to environmental differences and population isolation over time. The two forms are still able to interbreed. The child, though, normally takes the mother's form, but takes the father's if bred with a Ditto. Recently, East Sea CHAOSS's population has been declining, while West Sea CHAOSS has become more abundant than before. Which actually makes sense considering that warming oceans and the temperature does change what east or west form they take. While its diet may be simply plankton and we're not going to change that, its real-life inspirations have a little more to their diets. For example, sponges, soft corals, anemones, ascidians, and bryozoans, though it is much simpler within the Pokemon world to just say plankton instead of all of those. The closest they could have to all of those, or any of those, would actually be Corsola, but that is also not a soft coral, as one of those are. The final addition to this route is Buizel. Buizel's yellow collar is a flotation sac that can be inflated when it inhales. By doing so, it can keep its face above water to watch for prey movement or survey its surroundings. Conversely, it deflates this sac in order to dive. Its tails can spin to act as a propeller, allowing it to swim and slice through obstacles like seaweed. In the Pokemon the Series Diamond and Pearl episode mounting a Coordinator Assault, it is also shown to be able to fly using its spinning tail. It's like a little propeller. But Buizel usually lives alongside bodies of water. Clearly we know it's eating sea critters, but what could those sea critters be? Well, according to Monterey Bay Aquarium, the southern sea otter eats invertebrates like crabs, snails, urchins, clams, abalone, and mussels for breakfast, lunch, dinner, and between meal snacks. Northern sea otters are also known to eat fish. A sea otter may hunt on the seafloor, but always returns to the surface, floating there on its back. It uses its chest as a table. And if dinner is a crab or a clam, the otter may use a rock to crack open its prey. Do you carry a snack for later? An otter does too. An otter's coat has pockets, loose skin under each forearm. An otter uses them to stash prey during a dive, which leaves its paws free to hunt some more. Now, the ability and adaptation of floating within the water is obviously exaggerated in Buizel through its flotation sac and made even easier with no downside since Buizel can inflate and deflate this flotation sac at will. And the whole reason Buizel is here is because it's actually, oddly enough, eating Shellos, something I personally would have never expected. Though that's not all that Buizel is eating, as we do have Magikarp here, and that might make for an easier meal if it doesn't want to deal with the greasy fluid. When we move to the northern segment, we have many Pokemon and a chunk in which I've covered already in past region editions. There are Magikarp in the water again, Kricketot is here in the morning and at night. At night also is Hoot Hoot. Meanwhile, at all times of day, we find a friend in Wurmple and Bidoof, though it is at its highest population midday when the sun is high. We also see Bidoof, Pachirisu, Buizel, West Shellos, Suicune, Cascoon, and their evolutions. Beautifly and Dustox, which I actually have yet to talk about in detail, though their numbers are incredibly low at 1%, meaning they're likely hatching from within the forest
coming out here and immediately flying off. By the way, gotta say, I prefer dustox over beautyfly, and I named them in their relation to the moon, so I had a dustox named Luna. Beautyfly has a long and curled black proboscis that it uses to gather pollen and nectar, its favorite food, from flowers. Its diet also includes water, fruit juices, and bodily fluids from prey, all of which it sucks up with its proboscis. And I hate that, because I know that existed in the Pokemon Y Pokédex, but it even says the same thing in Brilliant Diamond, so it's not just, you know, a one-game random throw-out thing that exists. It's flat out a consistency. So, yeah, it will stick primarily to pollen and nectar, but if necessary, it will hunt prey. And at least real-life butterflies wait until they're already dead. Yes, if you didn't know, butterflies may serve as decomposers. This goes back to, once again, animals getting their nutrients where they can. As such, I'm going to make the assumption that beautyfly will not be hunting prey in 99% of occasions, assuming that there are flowers available to sustain its clearly ravenous appetite. Because once again, just like with Gorobus, I would rather not be insanguinated. We're done with beautyfly though, as it does get worse. Despite its appearance, beautyfly is known to be aggressive and greedy. It will jab at foes with its proboscis if it is disturbed while collecting pollen. So, yeah, unless you want to be treated like a boba cup, stay away from it. Don't pet the pretty butterfly while it is on the flower, or you will die. The preferred habitats of beautyfly are forests, where it rides the spring winds while searching for pollen. It also competes with comb for nectar, so I kind of imagine it just sink right into the poor comb. There's only so much pollen in the world, I suppose, technically. Dustox has an antennae it uses to seek out food. It is nocturnal and is instinctively drawn to light. Swarms are attracted by the bright light of cities, where they wreak havoc by devouring the leaves off roadside trees. When attacked, it unleashes toxic scales from its wings, and these toxins are powerful enough to make even a pro wrestler sick. As a result, people often have a difficult time driving dustox swarms away from settlements. It lives in forests, fields, and mountains. Interesting that it does specify pro wrestler though. I do suppose they just wanted to exemplify how even people who are incredibly good or in incredibly good shape fall to the power of these toxic scales. So it is an herbivore, primarily sticking to leaves, as it's clearly stated. Oddly enough though, there are not many of those Pokemon in this world just purely eating leaves. But after all that, I can paint a picture of this route. It's a bright, sunny day in Sinnoh, and the stream trickles gently, granting a moment of peace to the people and Pokemon that frequent this route. Within the water, we find Magikarp taking advantage of the easy swimming opportunity as bits of food float down to them, giving them a free and easy meal. Nearby, along the bank edges, we find a few Bidoof. They cheerfully chip and chirp as they eat saplings, maybe the occasional tree. But they are just wandering through this area on their own journeys. Even small squirrels in the form of Pachirisu bounce through the fields, their tails bobbing behind them as they gather berries here. All the while, Shellos takes the occasional stroll along the waterside to enjoy the environment before they would dip back under the water to wet their skin and eat their fill of plankton. They all live rather peacefully, that is, until the predator of the area decides it's time to hunt. Luckily, Weasel ignores the likes of our land lubbers, leaving them safe, though Shellos and Magikarp are targeted instead. The Magikarp may hold no real fight in them unless they can swim away fast enough, which is unlikely, but Shellos is able to escape on occasion when it excretes the purple fluid from its body, making the Weasel preoccupied with the sticky fluid long enough for Shellos to escape and live another day, as the mouth of the Weasel is gummed up, unable to be used. Beyond the forest, though, we find the reservoir of water in which the stream trickles from. This reservoir is filled by all the snowmelt as winter turns to spring, providing the area with what life-giving water it needs. Here, we find this same Weasel taking their fill, but other creatures gather here too throughout the day. Because as the Bidoof soak up water, sun, and nutrients, In the early morning, they stay on the lookout for any wormhole and beesThe that might hunt them down. The beesThe themselves having a much higher population here than in the southern segment, as they have a highly nutritious beesThe population available to them. The cricketot also take their fill of our leafy friend, so it is often best for beesThe to collect in the afternoon when there are less bugs to come after it. On the occasion, if you look closely enough, you may find Sokoon and Cascoon idling their time away in the shade of trees. They absorb what water might come their way, taking in what nutrients they may have leached on its journey down from the tree, but otherwise our cocoon friends simply wait until they can hatch. This is rather unfortunate for them only when day turns to night, because it is at this point that all of the bugs must take to hiding, lest the population of cricketot and the wurmple line we find here may be in danger from the shining eyes of Hoot Hoot. Their ticking and talking being a warning sign to all that are prey. Weasel itself may actually be too large for Hoot Hoot to take, which explains why its population is still high here, and the Patrisu may luck out with a good electrical shock, but otherwise our wise owl gets to have its pick of the prey. All while, if all goes according to plan, our Sokoon and Cascoon will one day hatch and leave this area. Meanwhile, beesThe, being one of those evolutions, may take some vengeance out on a Hoot Hoot or two. Let's turn back around now that we've talked about Weasel and Shellos and talk about Fuego Ironworks. While the ironworks are man-made, the area around it is still natural, and it is where we find our Pokemon. The sprawling ironworks is located with the forest at its back. It refines iron ore mined from Mount Coronet to make iron and to manufacture mechanical parts. All the Pokemon found here are found at all times of the day, although two Pokemon appear more often at certain times, like Magmar, which appears more during the day, likely as it is stronger in the sun. They also do hunt for prey, which we have assumed they will be opportunistic omnivores, especially as they take residence in incredibly hot places, explains why we find them here. We do find Magnemite here as well, known for consuming electricity and only fighting when bothered, though they are more likely to flee than flight, stunning you and floating away. Pachirisu scurries about, Shinx are found in the brush, and Shellos waddles up from the water. Though, now, through the interaction of Shinx hunting down Weasel all the time, we have our first pressure-induced evolution. For the veteran Weasel have faced enough battles to push back against the electrical links and evolve into Floatzel. Floatzel has a yellow flotation sac, which seems to behave similar to rubber. The flotation sac goes in a kind of ring behind its head, down its front of its arms, then back behind its rear above the tails. Floatzel's sac developed as a result of chasing prey in the water. I smiled. I am a terrible. My head is in the gutter. I'm awful. Help me. To help it dive, dive! Get it together! I did not type that way. That is how Bulbapedia states it, okay? To help it dive, Floatzel can deflate its flotation sac and then inflate it once again when it wishes to surface. Floatzel's sac allows it to not drown, even in stormy seas. Along with hunting for food, Floatzel can use its swimming capabilities to assist in the rescues of drowning people by carrying them like a raft. It is often seen near fishing hamlets. So its diet hasn't changed, although it clearly states that the flotation sac has developed due to chasing prey. So what could that prey be now that it can fight against Shinx? I'll state now that it isn't eating Shinx unless absolutely necessary. It's just not its taste. In the water, though, we do find a bunch of aquatic and semi-aquatic creatures. Tentacool and Tentacruel are here, though I am breaking my level rule to include them here and a couple of others. They are carnivores through and through in this world, eating anything that they can get their tentacles around. This would include the Wingull and Pelipers that we find here, which will eat and be eaten by them depending on the opportunity, especially as we found out that seagulls eat jellyfish during the Hoenn ecology segment. Though Weasel is likely not eating any of those four creatures and is likely just escaping the Tentacool line. Tentacool is just not nutritious enough. Shellos, as stated, is here and would have been a minor challenge whenever it sprayed its purple, greasy, sweaty ooze. Though now that Floatzel is here, its cute little self doesn't really stand much of a chance. Look, I'm just saying, I love the Shellos line, and they have one of the cutest cries in all of Pokemon, especially as we watch a cornered Shellos evolve to fight back in the form of Gastrodon, one of the best Pokemon cries out there, right next to... Now, Gastrodon are found here in less numbers than Floatzel during the day, but they increase at night, showing that there is some prey and predator relationships existing amongst others. Gastrodon and its pre-evolution Shellos are examples of allopatric speciation, which has been mentioned before. Although the two forms can still breed with each other. When threatened, it oozes a purple liquid and flees. While it is not poisonous, still, the fluid is very bitter and sticky. Its mucus-coated body is soft and squishy, yet surprisingly resilient, and it leaves behind a trail of sticky slime when moving on land. It also has strong regenerative capabilities that allow it to recover from injuries or dismemberment within a few hours. In ancient times, it had a shell on its back, which gradually became a thin yet hard vestigial plate. The regeneration is an incredible adaptation for creatures even in real life, so that way they don't have to fight. Basically, the idea here is that fighting takes up more energy than just letting something eat you for this Pokemon, and I guess Starfish too, because they'll just get parts of their body eaten by a fish or another creature, whatever it is, and they don't really fight, they just kind of let it happen. Same thing goes for Staryu, and as a result, they let the creature have its meal, it leaves them alone, and doesn't try to kill them. Meanwhile, all it has to do now is continue to survive and regrow that limb, which I guess doesn't take too much effort. Lizards are the same way too with their tails. Gastrodon live in shallow tidal pools, beaches, and rocky shorelines. Its diet consists mainly of plankton, but it is occasionally known to move onto land to look for other foods such as beach sand. When it finds prey, it melts it with mucus before eating them. We went from funny to dark. What the fuck? Gastrodon cannot stay out of the water for too long due to its body being highly vulnerable to dehydration. It becomes more active during cloudy or rainy weather. It has been found on far-off mountains during times of constant rain. The two forms of Gastrodon are known to engage in heated conflict with one another. West-Sea Gastrodon was much more numerous in the past than it is in the present, and East-Sea Gastrodon's population has visibly increased in population as of late. That is actually important to note because we otherwise would not know if it was different from Gastrodon than it was for Shellos. Now, let's rewind this just a little bit. Eating beach sand, and don't get me wrong, we've talked about this with Krabby and how small bits of nutrients, microorganisms, macroinvertebrates can all be found in sand, but then we get extra specification that it will melt prey with its mucus before eating them. This could simply mean that in times of desperation, it will eat other Pokemon, but will otherwise avoid conflict. Aren't snails, no, they don't do that. And what's interesting is that it is leaving a nice little trail of slimy mucus wherever it goes. So, I actually just thought it would be pretty interesting to watch a Gastrodon and see if, as it goes across the sand, it turns back around and starts eating the sand that it has gone across. It, of course, is going to be immune to its own mucus. It kind of goes throughout its body, it sweats it out, it excretes it in many different ways, so it would be safe, assumedly, for a Gastrodon to then eat, and it would make the digestive process easier. As such, it's not actually eating the sand, it's melting away whatever is there on the sand, or the sand itself, and then eating what remains. Like a weird, disgusting, out-of-body soup. Now, I also wouldn't be surprised if it would turn the tides on Tentacool and Tentacruel when necessary, turn the tides, to actually melt them down to eat the 1% of their bodies that aren't just water. Again, very unlikely in my opinion. And there are other creatures in the water, though, which would explain why we have a high Floatzel population as we step away from Gastrodon. Because Floatzel makes up like a quarter of the population here without a single weasel actually in sight. As we swim deeper, we find some of these other aquatic Pokemon, such as Magikarp, the carnivorous Shelder, because yes, it is carnivorous, and because I needed to remind myself, as I forgot, its enormously long red tongue coming out of its often closed mouth, which is usually hard to see due to how dark Shelder's body is used to burrow itself in the sand to sleep overnight, and also to lure and capture prey. Hence, why if Shelder were to close the tongue, nothing could come to it. The tongue protrudes even when its shell is closed, and tugging it will cause the shell to open. This is basically its own body lead lure. No filter feeding happening here with this Shelder. And then we find a newbie in the water as we have Finian. Finian's most notable feature is the pair of caudal fins that resemble a pair of blue butterfly wings with pink spots. The bottom lobes of a female Finian's tail fin are bigger than a male's, and its pink stripes and spots can absorb sunlight, which allows those areas to shine vividly at night. Finian shines itself as a form of camouflage as well as to attract prey. Because of its wing-like fins and beautiful appearance, it is known as the beauty fly of the sea and finnery fish. It lives in bodies of water and travels in schools, sometimes with Luminian, its evolution. Finian is popular with divers, and as a result, it is found living near resorts that feed them. It swims near the surface during the day to absorb sunlight, then dives into deeper waters at night. It is able to jump high and breach the water's surface with its tail fins, where it then is caught by the natural predator of it, Wingull. That is funnier than it should be. Because here we are talking about how pretty it is and how it has such beautiful, scales and how it lives such a nice life, all to end with it jumping in the air and getting snatched away by Wingull of all Pokemon. I know I shouldn't discount the bird that is meant to literally just eat everything that moves, but still, it makes me giggle. Though, what is Finian eating? Well, when we look at Luminian, it states how it eats Staryu and Starmie. Well, problem is, neither of them are actually here, and they will typically live on the sea floor. So, if they live in schools and stick around their evolution, Finian in as well. So in other words, Finian, being a Pokemon often found with its evolution, will simply eat whatever fish or sea creatures smaller than it that it also doesn't have to break the shell of. We can't support this as it is based on butterfly fish, which according to GeorgiaAquarium.org, an African butterfly fish's diet mostly consists of terrestrial insects, land insects, aquatic larvae, insect nymphs, crustaceans, and fish. They are ambush predators and are powerful jumpers that will jump to catch insects or escape predators using its large, broad caudal fins to propel itself out the water. There's nothing funny about Finian trying to escape a tentacle, jumping out the water, and immediately being caught by a Wingull. There is nothing funny about that. I don't even dislike the Pokemon. It's kind of pretty, so I just don't understand why my brain keeps going this direction, but it's hilarious to see Finian get attacked, I guess. That's how, don't take that out of context, that sounds terrible. But back on land, there is one more Pokemon we actually haven't discussed yet, because with most of its prey fighting back or escaping easier, Shinx begins to struggle for survival. But instead of succumbing to starvation, it bolsters itself, stands back up, and goes after a bigger fish, allowing it to evolve into Luxio. When facing an opponent, Luxio extends its claws in preparation, which can unleash 1 million volts of electricity. Even a slight scratch from these claws is enough to cause fainting. Oh, screw Pikachu, I guess. Pikachu had to use Z-Power to do the 1 million volt tackle. It was a big deal. Meanwhile, Luxio just casually does this all the time, apparently. Do you know how lethal high voltage stuff is? Let me explain to you. To give you an idea, 2,700 volts is usually agreed upon to be lethal. You are forever. Now, because this will give muscle spasms, and your heart is a muscle, you will go into cardiac arrest. Bum, 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 bum. Stop. No more heart not working. Though, with volts this high, you're already guaranteed to have burns from electricity on your skin, on your muscles probably, and you're getting burned. Sure, the power of the voltage lowers because of distance, but there's not enough to put you out of the danger zone unless you are out of sight of Luxio. Meanwhile, Luxio, the middle stage of this Pokemon, it still has one more form, is frying its meals deeper than a Kentucky Fried Chicken family bucket. Besides for attacking though, Luxio also uses its claws to communicate with others of its kind by resting them on the other's forelegs and sending electrical pulses through them. Luxio live in small groups and are able to generate powerful electricity by gathering the group's tails together. Luxio are known to be kind enough to share the spoils from a hunt to its own kind. As mentioned in Pokemon Sleep, Luxio is often observed sleeping peacefully. It is believed that Luxio feel a sense of safety due to living in small groups, and on occasion, they release electricity from their claws while they slumber. Researchers use the rhythm released by the electrical pulses to study Luxio's dreams. It is nice to see they are communal though, which does support the idea they're struggling for food in this area, resulting in the evolution. This also places Luxio firmly back on top of the pecking order in this area, as the only threat it would have is Gastrodon, where its electricity is not going to be useful against. Not that it was useful against Shellos, but Shellos is also small and I think they can handle it. So what does this all mean for Fuego Ironworks? I'm glad you asked, as now I can paint a picture for you. Fuego Ironworks is home to the Molten Foundries, and with an excess of metal, electricity, and heat, it is no wonder certain Pokemon are attracted to this location. Magnemite here may cause a few issues with electronics, though they aren't too terrible, and they may still be shooed away to just ensure the bills don't rise if they aren't actually taken in as working Pokemon. Other Pokemon that are drawn here by the excess warmth are the Magmar, the molten metal being very attractive to it, much like a volcano would be. They too become working Pokemon, occasionally stepping outside for their lunch break and finding wild Pokemon to hunt down. This actually does not include Magnemite, as they are found in equal numbers throughout the day. No, instead we see opportunity in the stray Pachirisu or Wingull, but has wandered too far from the waters. Magmar takes its meal fresh and then returns back to work. Though this is not the only predator on the prowl here, because even Wingull will scour the waters for any floating tentacle and Shellos, especially if the Shellos are too far from land. And so it swoops down, attacking them all and any other fish that dare swim towards the surface. Over time though, Wingull's higher population over the water affects the fish, causing Tentacool to evolve and strike back. Unfortunately for Finian and Shelder, this just means there are more worries here, as originally they were watching out for the birds and jellyfish already, but now they also have to worry about an otter that will actively chase them down as Weasel rotates its tail like a propeller once it has found its target. Weasel can spin itself through the waters and escape the clutches of Tentacruel, but it still has to be fast enough to chase down more than just Shellos, who will just make Weasel a sitting target by trapping it with its purple ichor. The stresses of the environment has now caused Weasel to evolve into Floatzel, who can command the waters easily and hunt down anything. Well, almost anything, because while it has reached incredible speeds in the water, it means nothing to a Pokemon that is in no rush as a veteran Shellos evolves into Gastrodon, able to cover it once more in its ichor and potentially even dissolve the otter into a hearty meal for our sea slug. Wingull flies overhead and wants nothing to do with this, but it too begins to struggle. After all, the squirrels can shock it to death as Pachirisu freely bounces around for the most part. I mean, as long as Shinx doesn't pounce on it, and every other fleshy creature in this area. I mean, actually, heck, those Shinx are even going after the Weasel that used to live here before Floatzel became the top dog around these parts. Maybe a simple evolution to get a bigger mouth for scooping wouldn't be so bad. And so, Wingull evolves into Pelipper, who simply does its own version of a fast food drive-by and scoops up all sorts of fish before getting caught. It may even pick up a Shinx or a Pachirisu for a spicy treat, and yes, I just called electricity spicy. With the relations of prey and predators flipped on its head, Shinx has no choice but to evolve into Luxio and take back the land for itself. It growls and shrieks as it releases 1 million volts of electricity into the surrounding area, forming packs with its own kind as it takes down avian, mammal, and aquatic creature alike on its mission to fill its stomach and the stomachs of its little group. And so we close out Fuego Ironworks and get back onto the routes. Well, I would say that if we didn't have a forest to actually talk about next. Eternal Forest. A forest enveloped in chilly air. Thick stands of trees turn the forest into a natural maze. Deep in the forest is the old chateau. It is falling into disrepair after being abandoned by its owner. These lists of Pokemon are so massive compared to the past ones, but at all times of day, we find Ghastly in small numbers, which consumes whatever has a life force, and it also itself likes the dark, which explains why it's here. Wurmple, primarily found during the day and rarely at night. Suicune, Cascoon, Beautyfly, and Dustox, which the latter two have the lowest numbers still. Bidoof waltzing on through at 10% to munch some tree. Bidoof primarily during the day, Kricketot in the morning and night, and a little bunny in the shape of Baneri that makes up nearly a quarter of the forest's population. Side note, bunnies don't exist. They aren't a thing. Rabbits exist. Bunny is the informal and non-scientific term that, I mean, because it's cute, I will let it pass. Just don't use it on a scientific paper. Baneri almost always keeps one of its ears rolled up. Although Professor Laviton has actually hypothesized that this is done to protect its hearing, in actuality, it rolls its ears so it can quickly unroll them and launch them as an attack. The attack is strong enough to hurt grown-ups and crush boulders, and increases in power as Baneri trains to use it. Baneri can also use this technique to jump really high by slamming its ears towards the ground. Baneri's arms and legs are weaker by comparison. I kind of imagine there's one Baneri out there that doesn't walk on its legs. Instead, it just holds itself up with its two ears and like gorilla walks with just the ears. Baneri's arms and legs are, of course, weaker by comparison, and if it senses danger, it perks up both ears. Conversely, though, if Baneri rolls both of its ears in, it is actually a sign that it is unhealthy. On cold nights, Baneri sleeps with its head tucked into its fur. It lives in forests, though it can also be found on icy mountains. In other words, do not touch its ears or you'll be treated to the same outcome as when a horse just kicks someone. Worse than that, actually, since it can, Baneri can destroy boulders with its ears. Rabbits are herbivorous, eating grass, flowers, vegetables, fruits, roots, or even twigs and bark if food is looking scarce, which it will likely be doing on those mountainsides if it can't dig up the roots. It is definitely eating some Bidoof alongside the regular vegetation in the forest, but what is preying on Baneri? Well, we need to shift over to the nighttime to find our answer here, because the 4% population ratio of Ghastly is just not doing it. Rather, at night we find Hoot Hoot here, which would eat Baneri. We also find Mischievous, but it only feeds on emotions produced when it scares others, so it doesn't really eat or get eaten by anything else. Though, it might raise some heart rates to the point of cardiac arrest. No, rather, our answer lies in a new bird found in these dark forests, Murkrow. Murkrow awakens at dusk and moves during the night. It has a fondness for anything sparkly, and will go as far as fighting with other Pokemon such as Meowth or Gabite in order to gain their stashes. However, it is also known to give these sparkly objects to trainers that it is fond of. I'll say it now, I love corvids. Ravens and crows are in my top 5 birds. Other birds that are in the top 5 include owls, penguins, and the great Patoo. But this isn't about them. This is about how corvids actually will trade goods that they seem, or deem rather, valuable. Ravens can learn words, and both are even smart enough to actually understand water displacement, using it to get food, as proven in science experiments. I love these funky little dinosaurs so much. But back to Murkrow specifically. Whenever it is chased, it loses the attacker by leading it down dark mountain trails, and sometimes it does this to travelers as a mean-spirited prank. Its thieving and nocturnal nature has led it to become representative of misfortune. It was believed that saying work crumb, bad luck don't come would serve as a protective incantation to drive away bad luck caused by seeing a Murkrow, and yeah, if you notice, that's just saying Murkrow backwards, Murkrow. It is possible to train a Murkrow to repeat words as seen under Team Rocket's ownership. Murkrow usually live in flocks, referred to as murders, amongst forests and swamps. Murkrow may also act as a servant of Honchkrow, with groups of at least 100 flying in at Honchkrow's call. Now, there is a saying for Murkrow that goes, get home before the Murkrow fly, and I will say now, I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but I know it's not every crow is bad luck. It's like, I think it's 3 crows, but every number of crow actually represents a different thing, whether it's good luck, bad luck, or even death, or incredible fortune. It just depends on how many cross your path, or you see. Now, this tells us nothing about Murkrow's diet, so let's consult the American Bird Conservancy for more info on crows. And honestly, they actually put it best. A better question might be, what do crows not eat? American crows are omnivorous opportunists. They eat nearly all edible foods, from crabs and crab apples to birds, french fries, frogs, and carrion. The list is so long, we've organized it into multiple categories for easier consumption. So yeah, fruits, seeds, insects, amphibians, reptiles, bird eggs, birds, mammals such as mice, voles, bats, or shrews, fish, mollusks, and of course, carrion. They are exceptional foragers as well. Funny enough though, at least for the real crow, their beaks aren't strong enough to even break through the hide of a squirrel. So they wait until they are post-mortem and eat what remains. They are even smart enough though to save food away and might be communal with their own crows if they please. All of this info lines up really nicely with Murkrow here, as it will eat anything and everything it can within Eterna Forest. Though it is hard to judge what Murkrow wouldn't be able to eat through the info that we have on crows. And so I decided to dig deeper into the hides of animals. That sounds really, really bad out of context. Turns out though, a squirrel hide is actually just incredibly tough, tougher than rabbits, and then the backs and shoulders of beavers, the hide there is also fairly tough, meaning that their undersides might be a bit easier for a crow of Murkrow's size to attack. So we could actually assume fairly that everything in this forest is on the dinner plate, as Murkrow would have a beak strong enough to feed. Though Beautyfly and Dustox theoretically would have the strength to resist and escape Murkrow, if not even Beautyfly might take a stab back at Murkrow. Same goes for Hoot Hoot, as I am sure the two would fight and the winner would get the spoils. And while I do love a good forest, it's about time that we move on. Now, I don't have Haute Chateau written up here at all. It is abandoned, so I should at least mention it. The only encounters that you can get in there without any special extra things like a cartridge in the bottom is Ghastly. Then, of course, you can get a Rotom in the TV, making it one of the most horrifying early Pokemon experiences that people have had. Now, we've already talked about what Ghastly does. It's not preying on other Ghastly. They just like the darker environment. They feel safe there. Same would go for their evolutions, which is how you get them through having the cartridge and the DS in addition to the actual DS cartridge. And then with Rotom, it is made of plasma. It technically consumes electricity, and it likes to take a residence inside of electronics while also being a little bit of a mischief maker. There is not a real ecosystem there. I also just didn't want to ignore it, because we're not going to be able to really talk about Rotom, I think, until I do the Legends Arceus ecosystem, and that's like the second to last of this series that I'm going to do, until more generations come out, of course. Route 206. Smoothly paved in asphalt, the cycling road is heavenly for bicycle lovers. Below the cycling road, one can see the entrance to Wayward Cave. This is another one of our exceptions to the no human influence rule, as it is a route and holds quite a few interesting Pokemon. And it's not like we find these Pokemon anything other than grass in the area anyway. We only find Kricketot during the morning hours. Zubat are only found at night. Meanwhile, at all times of day, we get our buffet of Pokemon. Our herbivorous Ponyta and Machop. As a reminder, all fighting types are considered herbivorous unless directly stated otherwise. They are designed to be noble in characteristics, often noted to only eat berries and fight only to train, often even isolating themselves from other Pokemon. Again though, there are some exceptions, as we will learn later. Geodude is here eating rocks and more rocks, but with moss on them. And then we have 4 new Pokemon. We will start with the evolution of Kricketot, Kricketune, which do have a higher population at night. This Pokemon's arms are shaped similar to its antennae and are crossed over its chest when it cries. By rubbing its arms together, Kricketune can produce sounds and improvise melodies. It can also allow its cry to resonate in its belly. Kricketune's melodies vary greatly between individuals and can be used to signal its emotions. Scientists have been observing the melodic patterns of Kricketune for studies. In one village, Kricketune are used in a contest based on the different sounds it makes. So, we have already discussed what crickets will eat, and we have a very big cricket here. It's kinda scary because its arms are compared to cutlasses, and that reminds me of praying mantis. I would not be surprised to find it eating some mammals with how large it is when it's desperate. Otherwise, there are a bunch of other large bug Pokemon anyway, so it might just eat them primarily. The problem with that all though, is that there is only Kricketot, and it is clearly a communal Pokemon. So that means Kricketune is likely primarily in this area, munching on plants, seeds, fruits, detritus, and carrion around these parts. Again, I will state once more, other Pokemon if it's desperate. Otherwise, someone has to be nature's cleaner. Though, this evolution doesn't come freely. It comes from being hunted after. No, not just by the Zubat, that's not enough, but by our next entry, as it is likely Kricketot's primary predator, Stunky. Stunky can spray a foul-smelling liquid from its rear in order to drive attackers away, which is able to reach up to 16 feet or 5 meters away. It prefers to aim for its target's face, and the stench can be smelled from over a mile, 2 kilometers, away, and will linger for around 24 hours. And the stench can cause memory loss, because great, as if being sprayed wasn't enough, I get to lose my memory of it? Actually, that is kind of a nice thing. Also, could you imagine just being sprayed by a Stunky, forgetting you got sprayed, and then getting sprayed again? It's hilarious at first, but then the more you think about it, the more you realize how genius of an adaptation that actually is. It basically means that Stunky can rely on this singular adaptation consistently and constantly, making even experienced hunters that would come after Stunky bow before it, assuming its spray is strong enough. The little butt-faced skunk has actually garnered more respect from me just from this little ability. Not that I actually disliked it, but young Krillek never realized that it was poison and dark type, so it was scary to fight unless I had my goopy Gastrodon with me. Now, to confirm what I said earlier about it preying on, Kricketot, Kricketune, we will use information from the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife. Skunks' favorite foods include mice, moles, voles, rats, birds, and their eggs and carcasses. Also grasshoppers, wasps, bees, crickets, beetles, and beetle larvae. Skunks also eat fruits, nuts, golden crops, and scavenge on garbage, birdseed, and pet food. So, I guess this is also our nature's cleaner, really just our opportunistic omnivore, while also being a very active hunter of Kricketot as its favorite food. I knew they ate insects, but to know that grasshoppers are one of their favorite foods actually catches me off guard a little bit. Always remember though, if there is an evolution in an area, there has to be a guaranteed reason for that evolution. And it is usually these external pressures, or excess food, resulting in a higher population and the chance of evolution. Another creature hunting anything that has meat and blood is actually the fly scorpion Gligar. As shown in the Pokemon the Series episode, Riding the Winds of Change, Gligar feed on berries and can emit sound waves to detect obstacles and fly around them. It glides smoothly and silently through the air, with its limbs extended, and startles its prey and enemies by flying straight toward them. It attacks by clamping onto its enemy's face with its clawed hind legs and pincers, then jabbing it with its poisonous stinger. Gligar itself is resistant to opponents' venom. It lives in mountainous regions, making its nest along cliff sides, and when it is done gliding, it hops along the ground back to its nest. In Hisui, it is revealed that Gligar can survive even freezing temperatures. So simply put, we have another omnivore here. It is also nothing like its real-life version, as the real scorpionfly is not dangerous to humans, and they stick to dead or dying insects, nectar, or rotting fruit, primarily. Thank you, Missouri Department of Conservation. They still look freaky, and I don't want them anywhere near me. I've had my fill of freaky bugs when I worked as a Parks and Rec individual, and also did my field surveying in college. I've seen some very brightly colored spiders in places I would not expect them to be. The last new entry on this route is the living dinner plate known as Bronzor. Bronzor's crest is said to possess a mysterious power and is held sacred. It was first seen in ancient tombs and time-worn places. Objects resembling this Pokemon have also been found in tombs. Scientists believe Bronzor used to be reflective and have unsuccessfully tried performing X-rays on its body. I mean, it's made of metal. It's probably blocking the X-rays. The pattern of Bronzor in Galar cannot be found in any of its cultures, and the reason is unknown. There is lore on how polishing Bronzor will make its surface reflect the truth. However, it hates being polished, and it uses an unknown energy to help it float around. It typically lives in mountainous paths. So great. Another Pokemon with unknown energy. It does have a symbol on its back, similar to a grain spike, just like its evolution Bronzong, and we know that there are myths stating how Bronzong can be wrung to summon rain for better harvest. If we look at Bronzong's moveset, that actually checks out, as we see it automatically knows at level 1 the following moves: Sunny Day and Weather Ball. Though it doesn't learn Rain Dance until level 56, which is absurd. That is absolutely out of the normal. So clearly, I mean, with every other Pokemon learning that move earlier, the game devs were clearly trying to make the move stand out. But if all this is true, then that means Bronzor isn't eaten by anything or eating anything here. I refuse to label it as one of the rest of the anomalies from the other regions, from the past versions of these ecology series. There has to be something here, and I am placing my bet that we will find more answers in the nearby caves. For my own sanity, I have to. This route, honestly though, isn't all that interesting or intricate outside of what we have discussed, so we'll save the picture painting for now. Wayward Cave. Now, don't worry, I do intend to save Legends Arceus for its own edition of the ecosystem as mentioned, because that version of this cave is very different compared to this version of the cave. I mean, so is everything else in that game, to be fair. It's going to be difficult to break everything down in Arceus. But in here, we have a first floor and a basement. On the first floor, we find Zubat, Geodude, Onix, which is just eating rocks and making tunnels, nothing's going to bother it, and Bronzor. If we take our careful steps down to the basement level, everyone's population drops except for Bronzor, as room is made for Gible. In the past, Gible lived in the tropics. Gible appears to be a good digger, making deep holes for homes in caverns warmed by geothermal heat. Oh, that stings to my heart. I love geothermal heat so much. If only it was available in more places. It's incredibly expensive to start up, but long term, as long as it's maintained, is amazing. This heated environment allows Gible to survive even during the winter. It has also been seen huddling with other members of its species to stave off the cold, although it enjoys play fighting with them as well. Gible is typically sighted in rocky areas such as mountains. Gible has a tremendously strong jaw that it uses to bite enemies and prey alike, dragging the latter back to its nest. However, even while biting, it often hurts itself because of its clumsiness. This sometimes causes its teeth to chip and fall off in the process, but Gible is never bothered by this because the teeth will grow back after a few days. It's eating a lot of calcium. As shown in the animated series, Gible is capable of eating through most types of metal. The last Arceus, we have a potential answer, though that is actually just me coping, because, sure, the Gible line, more aptly the Gabite stage, is known to drag shiny treasures to its den, and Carbink, but that isn't Kalos. This means that Bronzor may not actually be getting eaten, thus explaining the fact that its numbers haven't actually increased or decreased. They're likely just getting dragged back and forth by the Gible population here and escaping outside when they can. Other than that, though, it's just pretty obvious that our little land shark here is meant to be the apex predator. Route 207, located at the foot of Mount Coronet, this road is carved into the rugged, rocky terrain, blah, 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 same as the other regions. Zubat, Machop, Geodude, Ponyta, Kricketot. None of them even interact with each other, except Zubat, of course, who's going to go after anyone who has blood. With it being a rugged terrain, I will at least admit that explains why we find Machop and Geodude as the primary Pokemon here, and why we also see Ponyta, because they actually live in these types of environments. I mean, for the Machop and Geodude, you gotta train and eat rocks somewhere, after all. Also, we're gonna wait to talk about Mount Coronet and its just massive layout. It's a little intimidating, and it's a long trek to the top, so I want to keep it as one continual piece. Route 208. A lush field of grass spreads from Mount Coronet's sheer rock face, creating a vista of contrasts. The Berry Master, an old man who loves nature, Pokemon, and berries, makes his home here. In the water, we can fish for Magikarp and Goldeen, and that fancy tail is eating other Pokemon, but primarily sticking to underwater flora. We find Zubat only at night, while Badoo is only around during the day this time, and the rest are found at all times. As we see Machop and Meditite, they are actually a little bit less common at night. We have the Emotion Devourer Ralts, which does not harm other Pokemon, Roselia, which is going to want to be pollinated without its flowers being taken away, otherwise it will fight back, Psyduck in the highest numbers for the first time, Bidoof, and finally, Bibarel. This Pokemon is known to be an industrious worker. It builds its nest by damming rivers, using bark, roots, and branches it has cut up with its teeth, along with mud. A river dammed by Bibarel will never overflow. Bibarel is slow-moving and awkward out of the water, but it is a swift swimmer comparable to a Feebas. Bibarel's fur is very good at repelling water and retaining heat. Gotta say though, feeling bad for Feebas, as it doesn't even get a compliment in its own entries and information. Instead, you have to look at a whole other Pokemon to figure out that it's even a swift swimmer. I mean, unless of course you look at its ability. So, it's clear that our diet has not changed, but now we have to ask, why did it evolve here? Well, actually, the answer isn't because it's being hunted by any other Pokemon. Zubat is here to take some blood, but that's not enough. It's actually because of the excess of food for it. It's a lush field of grass, but that also means that the rest of the vegetation should be plenty healthy and bountiful. This is also supported by the higher Badoo population, and the pressure from Bidoof line would result in Badoo needing to evolve in order to defend itself, further explaining why Roselia is actually here. Unfortunately for Roselia, there aren't any Pokemon here that will likely help it pollinate, as the Firefly twins did in Hoenn, so it'll have to migrate a bit out of this area. And, as such, in a fight to ensure that it could get its food, Bidoof evolved into Bibarel. I also wouldn't be surprised if they were helping with the bridge, or even helped prevent mass flooding from snowmelt, since this water is likely pulling down from Mount Coronet. Route 209. The streams forded by this path wind past copses and grassy patches in a serene and soothing manner. The Lost Tower is where Pokemon are laid to rest when their lives come to an end. Magikarp and Goldeen we find in the water again. Zubat, of course, at night. They're almost always here in 10%. And though we do find Duskull and Ghastly here in its highest overworld rate at 10% as well, likely has to do with our wonderful Lost Tower. When we look further, we now find Ralts, Roselia taking a good chunk at the quarter of the population, tons of Bibarel here as well, which supports our statements on the previous route, as it is typical to see an increase of Predator when prey population increases. After all, the more food there is, the more babies you can have. No Bidoof here, though. And then finally, we get Chansey, who is here serving her own eggs like a sociopath, but because of her motherly nature, because all Chansey are female, she has attracted the attention of a couple of babies, Bonsley and Mime Jr. Bonsley is often mistaken for a grass type, but its body is biologically closer to stone, but doesn't say that it is stone. It is a good mimic, making it often mistaken for a real bonsai tree, though it can easily stand out in a dry environment that lacks greenery. As its green spheres dry out, their dull luster increases. It can remain in the same spot for a long time. It has a habit of crying, not because it is sad or needing attention, but rather it's because of the moisture in its body. As it cries, it expels both sweat and tears from its eyes. Bonsley's sweat tastes a little salty, while the tears are slightly bitter. We need to stop tasting the liquid from Pokemon. I get it, milk is a thing, but is it different? Is it really different? Are you gonna lie to yourself like that? It prefers dry, rock-strewn areas, but it isn't uncommon to see one in a garden. As suggested by Brock's Bonsley, a very young one needs to be bottle-fed, but can eat solid food when it matures. We'll come back to that. As mentioned in the sleep style decks, people tend to think Bonsley is crying in its sleep, and something is wrong. However, it is merely expelling water from its body to adjust its fluid levels. So, you're telling me that with Sudowoodo, who we have no diet info on, yet when we look at Bonsley, it has to be bottle fed and then it eats solid food when it matures? Look, I get it. There's a whole meme here that could be about, oh, it's getting its essential vitamins and minerals as they come in many forms. Like, come on! I made the claim that Sudowoodo wouldn't eat anything because of the moisture, and we know these Pokemon would die if they had too much moisture, but they can sweat and cry, so I guess that's how they get rid of it, I suppose. The best I could simply think of is this. The green spheres must serve as two tools. One, as an indicator to tell when there's too much moisture in its own body, as made apparent by the amount of luster they have, the dull luster. And two, to be a sort of pestle to grind down rocks and minerals that it can eat. I refused to chalk it up as an nonpartisan anomaly of the ecosystem like Ditto, Drowsy, and whatever other Pokemon I said was in that group from Hoenn. And I don't think it's eating other Pokemon. Whatever. A man of science must try his hardest, though I will at least admit, this explains why Bonsley is here. The ones that are very young are being tended to by Chansey. So it might actually be eating eggs because it doesn't have much of a choice. Moving on to Mime Jr., it has a knack for imitating others. Though it is not very good at it, it can easily pick up the emotions of those around it and imitate them. It has been known to mimic its foes in order to create distractions. Once the foe is confused, it will quickly escape. In Galar, they tend to idolize and imitate its final evolved form, Mr. Rhyme, which are widely popular in the region for their talent in tap dancing. By practicing their dancing steps, they eventually evolve into Galarian Mr. Mime. It likes places where many people gather and has often been seen visiting marketplaces filled with people. As mentioned in its sleep style decks, Mime Jr. can be found sleeping on pantomime beds on rare occasions. So it just kind of sleeps on a bed above the ground, just kind of a little light screen there, I guess. Now, it is known to have put a lot of heart and effort into mimicking its evolution, Mr. Mime, even when it's sleeping. This makes it a little weird. I know we're not talking about the Galarian Mr. Mime or even Mr. Rhyme for that matter. I would have to assume that's like a Mime Jr. really loved tap dancing instead of mimes, and then mimicked a mime or tap dancer, and then we got their evolutions, and then it went further for the Mr. Rhyme, which I like Mr. Rhyme more than I do the rest of the lines. I mean, I don't know. And I will say, even though, again, we are not talking about the Galarian forms, that does not make them irrelevant. It tells us that if a Mime Jr. imprints on another creature, we could have a slew of different Mr. Mimes, or even further, whatever their final forms would be. And personally, again, Mime Jr. is very cute, and I do enjoy Mr. Rhyme quite a bit. Nothing against clowns. I think they're fun in both the modern and the theater sense, actually. Now, none of the evolutions say anything about diets. They are humanoid, they are mimes, and while it would be fun to say that they are omnivorous, to lean into the whole Mr. Mime is evil thing that everyone has for it, that would not be correct, and it would be unfair. Because every time I have seen this Pokemon in front of or near food, it is not eating it, or is only eating something without meat in it. Beans and rice, potato chips, generic Pokemon food. But let me tell you, the one time it has meat in front of it, as Ash and Delia, I think Delia is her name, his mom, are eating meat, they have plates in front of them, and Mr. Mime doesn't, as it sits at the table as well. And don't you dare tell me the anime is not canon. Of course, I understand that. But it still takes information directly from canonical sources and is the only way that we can tell what this Pokemon eats, because it doesn't even seem to show that it has teeth, meaning it can't even rip flesh apart most likely. Look, it's intelligent enough to cook, understand housely duties, human relations, and it only punishes those that mess with its opponents. It doesn't eat them, punishes. This is all the evidence that we have. Mr. Mime is an herbivore, meaning Mr. Jr. We're moving on! The last Pokemon we do find here that's actually new is found because of Starly struggling to get food due to the high population of Bibarel here eating everything. As such, Starly needed to faster and be stronger, resulting in Staravia. Staravia lives near forests and fields where it hunts for bug Pokemon. Aware of its own weakness, it forms flocks of its own kind and cries noisily if left on its own. However, these flocks can be extremely territorial. When two different groups meet, they will have fierce territorial disputes, and a strong Staravia can be identified by the plume it has on its head. So, now that it has grown, it is said to be just hunting for bug Pokemon. This isn't unheard of. There are creatures in real life that do mature and change their dietary habits after all. I would still suspect that Staravia is still eating some leafy greens though. Otherwise, we wouldn't find it and Starly making up nearly half of the population here together. Despite the grand array of Pokemon, there's not a lot to paint a picture with, if I have to be honest. Chansey being here is because we know the daycare is nearby, so we get all these baby Pokemon in addition to Ralts, who gets a positive role model to feed emotions from, and it can always just go back to the daycare. We already explained the relationship between our birds, beavers, and plants. Sounds like a euphemism. And then Duskull and Gastly are here because this place is freaking haunted. And I'm not even remotely kidding. The Hallowed Tower is right here, and it's how you get Spiritomb. The Pokemon that is made up of 108 spirits, evil spirits, mind you, that were entombed into the Odd Keystone to repent for their sins before they can move on to the afterlife. That thing does not take part in the ecosystem and only serves to possess and be evil. I love the Pokemon, but I cannot ignore the malice in it. Also, I've mentioned it before, but I'm 99% sure that Hisu and Typhlosion, which also has 108 flames, made Spiritomb, as it does help souls go part through the afterlife. Otherwise, that's this route, and I'll briefly talk about Salacion Ruins, because it does have something nice in it. And we get guides as to where to go to reach HM05, Defog, which I did forget that was an HM back in the day, making me feel old. There are all the unknown here, even the exclamation point and question mark versions, which I forgot existed. Though, as we venture deeper, we find some script, and the script does state, friendship. All lives touch other lives to create something anew and alive. And I want to just take a brief moment here. I am a fairly happy and generally emotional person. I temper myself with logic and science in all that I do, and I suck things up and I push forward. I'm working harder when things get tough. It's just the way I've always been. I don't know, and I don't really know what's going to happen. You know what I mean? I don't know what's going to happen in the afterlife, and to think that there's a chance I won't see anyone I know and love after this, that I won't be able to interact with the people that I've met through doing this and make people smile after everything is a little scary. Death itself doesn't terrify me, but I know when the time comes, I can still smile knowing that I've been able to reach out to so many people through my rants and ramblings and this deep dive that I love to do all the time. I could do this until I'm old enough to look like Professor Oak himself, and I'd be happy to if given the opportunity. So, I don't know. I felt like with the unknown part there, it kind of hit me in a interesting spot, because I feel like through this community, something anew and alive was created that's beyond any one singular person, and we're still tiny. We're still small. So, thank you, and back to the video.
Route 210. This narrow route is lined with deep, tall grass that tickles the noses of people straying off the path. The cafe cabin stands in a wood. The house special is freshly milked moo moo milk, and a path made by clearing an overgrown canyon between mountains. And there is a path here made by clearing an overgrown canyon between the mountains. It is always shrouded by a dense fog. Mime Jr., Bondsley, Cricketoon, Sarabia, Hoot Hoot, Noctowl, Chansey, Ponita, Geodude, and finally, after all this time, we finally get Scyther in the wild, occurring all on its own. And no, there were no mistakes. Trust me, I do read the comments. I love the constructive criticism. You have every right to do it. It's how I grow. But there were no mistakes on this one. You can only find Scyther in the Safari Zone, in trade, or pay for one in Celadon, or special events until now. So, what does that even mean for our Pokemon like Scyther? Are they actually not native to Kanto or Johto? Because it definitely seems like it. Though the Safari Zone, you know, you might try to claim anything like that, it is an amusement park, meaning all the Pokemon are hand-picked and placed there. Same goes for the National Park Bug Catching Contest, as that is the only way to get it in Heart Gold and Soul Silver. It's no different than the modern Blueberry Academy. Actually, it is a little bit different because they are trying to bring the Pokemon in and make sure it's like, you know, they survive and it's more than just an amusement. So whatever. Either way, enough going on about the strangeness of it. Let's finally read up on Scyther. Scyther is an adept hunter that tears its prey with its size. Well, that was fast. Thanks to its green coloration, it can camouflage itself well in the grasslands and forests where it lives. Humans rarely encounter wild Scyther in these areas, however. Said to be like a ninja, Scyther can move so quickly that it cannot be followed, increasing the effectiveness of its scythes. It maintains the sharpness of its blades through battle, as well as by cutting through hard objects such as trees. It can cut down a massive tree with just a single slice, although it has difficulty and cannot penetrate Tarantulas' elastic threads. The Pokemon this series episode Tracy Gets Bugged showed that wild Scyther forms swarms with a single leader chosen through combat. When a challenger successfully defeats a current leader and replaces it, the defeated leader is exiled from the swarm. In Showdown at Dark City, it was shown that Scyther becomes aggressive when faced with the color red. Which, I mean, considering its evolution with Metal Coat, there might be a problem there. Though, we do have confirmation that it does eat other bugs, or at least attempts to. And, according to National Geographic, praying mantis eat not only crickets and grasshoppers, the mantids also eat spiders, frogs, lizards, and even small birds. I am very confident that with Scyther's size, this means they would also eat mammals given the opportunity, one of the few times that I will stray from some of the more typical direct science that we have been told. Meaning, once again, we have a full-blown carnivore on our hands. This would explain why we have no Kricketot here and why Noctowl can be found here. We know it isn't hunting Ponyta because of not just because of the typing difference, but because Ponyta has double the population of Scyther, and so does Geodude for that matter. Meanwhile, everything else is lower, meaning they are either rare in the case of Chansey and the kids, or being eaten. Such is the case with Hoothoot and Cricketoon. The higher Cricketoon population only comes around at night when there are less Scyther as well. I would be willing to bet that Cricketoon would be having showdowns with Scyther, considering they both have bladed arms. And as always, to the victor goes the spoils. Route 211, a mountain path that tunnels through Mount Coronet, one of the tallest mountains in Sinnoh. Many of these same Pokemon once more on both the eastern and western segments of this route. Many of the fighting types are just here because they are training. On the west side, we have Zubat, Machop, Geodude, Ponyta, Hoothoot, Meditite, Bidoof, Bronzor, and Shingling. Which, get ready for this roller coaster.
Inside of its mouth is a red orb, which creates a ringing sound as the Pokemon moves. Additionally, the orb can be vibrated to create high-frequency, long-lasting cries to deafen its opponents. These sounds produced can be too high for people to hear, yet powerful enough to give them headaches. Atop its body is ring-like growth with a striped rope through the middle. The rope is red and white with short tassels on the ends. This tells us nothing about what it eats, but you know what does? The fact that Chimecho directly states that it is omnivorous, plucking berries with its tail while knocking out prey with its headache-inducing ringing. It's always the cute ones that'll murder you. Chingling is found at all times, so what could it be eating? Well, we could consider that it is a psychic type. In addition, we can suspect Chingling, at the very least, is not eating people at all, because yes, it'll give us a headache, but it's not enough to knock us out, assumedly. So, this would be an adaptation meant to take down other Pokemon and defend itself. It is a baby. Well, not a baby Pokemon, but it's small, so we might assume that it is currently herbivorous, but that is unlikely since most creatures need extra protein in order to grow from a young age, especially if they're growing into a more omnivorous or carnivorous diet. I would be willing to bet that Chingling, being found at 15% roughly, is likely eating anything at a lower population to it. That leaves us with Bronzor, Zubat, Machop, and Hoothoot. To support this, on the opposite side of the route where the encounters change, we find the same Pokemon across the board, except instead of Machop, there is a larger population of Machoke. Instead of Hoothoot, there are only Noctowl, and there are no more Geodude. Instead, there are only Graveler. We know Machop and Geodude would train together as per info from Machop, so that could result in their evolution, knocking them away from a possibility. We're not even going to consider Bronzor because it is metal, and we have nothing stating that this little Jingle Bell eats metal, but Hoothoot isn't eating anything here but Zubat, and they haven't evolved into Golbat here. If we follow our guidelines of pressure-creating evolution, that means that Chingling is primarily eating Hoothoot, but not the other way around. And do you know what can mess with the ability of an owl to hunt in darkness? Bells. Disrupting the faint sounds that they listen for and even being distracted by their sudden shine, giving Chingling the perfect opportunity to strike. And sure, it might be eating a few Zubats, but it is much easier to take down the Hoothoot. And without two predators to put pressure on Zubat, it doesn't evolve. Instead, the Hoothoot are struggling to find food and are being eaten, creating two pressures to force its evolution into Noctowl. Look, this is not the conclusion I wanted to come to, but here we are anyway. No taking it back. I will stand firm on this to the end of time, just like how Clefairy is not a carnivore. The data speaks for itself. You know, I have to admit, there was a comment saying that I had too much attitude and too much yelling. First off, I'm sorry that you want to go listen to a robot talk like this for the entirety of the video. Number 15, Burger King foot lettuce. Let me talk like this the entire video with no real inflection. Is that what you want? And 2, I have attitude because I have genuine emotion. If you don't want that, go watch someone else. For everybody else that's here, thank you. Again, constructive criticism is nice, but I'm going to keep my attitude and my emotions because that's fun for me as well. Route 212. A tall, sturdy wall surrounds an expansive estate that takes up nearly half of the road space. Beyond the wall, one can see the stately Pokemon mansion and the owner's prized garden behind it. This path weaves among deep puddles made by the unending rainfall. It is wet and miserable for trainers, and there is a house here whose residents offer to trade TMs for red, blue, yellow, or green shards. Pokemon on the northern side are seen elsewhere with Marill, who eats fish. Roselia, Starly, Staravia, Kricketune, Badoo, Magikarp, Goldeen, Ralts, and funnily enough, we actually get Curlia here, and in double the numbers during the morning. though it is in equal numbers for the rest of the day when compared to the Ralt's population. Curlia's horns are used to amplify its psychokinetic power and distort the air around it. The distortion in the air causes scenery mirages and can cause a rip in dimensions. Oh my gosh. This ability also allows Curlia to see into the future. It enjoys dancing on sunny mornings and grows beautiful when exposed to a trainer with positive emotions. Curlia inhabits urban areas. As mentioned in Pokemon Sleep, it is known to dance while it sleeps. The reason is due to Curlia having a premonition of a fun future in its dreams. That is adorable. Okay, so it likes to dance in the morning. That explains why they have the higher population during the morning, but that still tells us nothing about why are they here and why did they evolve? Well, Ralts is an urban Pokemon, so we have to consider now the human and urban influence on them. As such, we find that north of this route is Heart Home City, home of the contest hall and the 5th largest city in the entirety of the Pokemon world currently. This means there are plenty of people, likely a ton of happy feelings for Ralts to consume, and with a higher food source, we have a higher population and ultimately a chance of evolution as previously stated. As we move on to the southern rainy side of this route, it gets a bit interesting. We have Wooper and Quagsire found at all times, who thanks to their Japanese giant salamander origins are eating fish, insects, crayfish, snails, small mammals, pretty much anything that falls into their mouth, especially since they are large. That just isn't a plant. Thank you to the reindeernational.si.edu for reinstating that information. They get to exist here happily in the highest numbers since the rain keeps them plenty moist and they can actually exit the water. Roselia is here too, making up a quarter of the population during the day. Bibarel makes up roughly a third. Kricketune has a small population during the day, but increases to a third at night, meaning that it's likely being hunted during the day. Weasel has a small population here. East Shellos has the highest population at nearly half. And then there's Kogunk with a small population as well. Just as a note, if you're doing the math, we went over 100%. And that's because the data I take is from Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum combined, which is why I typically don't state the percentages or ratios as it gets confusing very quickly. Though, again, they are fantastic guidelines as to how many Pokemon we will consistently see here. Back to Krogunk, since I just glossed over the fact that they're new here. Krogunk's cheek pouches and fingers contain a poisonous fluid. However, the fluid squeezed from its finger is also a significant ingredient in remedies for lower back pain once diluted. The cheek pouches can be used to create an unnerving sound. When its opponents are distracted, it tries to stab them with its fingers. Despite this, it fights others only to ensure its own survival. Krogunk is a popular Pokemon due to being chosen as a mascot for a pharmaceutical company. It is also popular thanks to its strange cry and comical look. Krogunk and its evolved form, Toxicroak, are related to Seismitoad. Krogunk is said to have a dastardly nature due to it wielding poison. It usually lives in swamps and forested areas, and as mentioned in its sleep-style dex, it has been observed inflating its poison sac cheeks while sleeping. On occasion, the sound from its poison sac will actually wake it up. I will admit, Krogunk is growing on me more and more over time, and it is a fighting poison type. The fact that it has a claw on its middle fingers actually could, point towards the whole idea of being underhanded in boxing. It does have poison jab and all these other abilities, these jab-like attacks. And so, if you want to be a bad person when you're punching, or I guess if you want to defend yourself, fight dirty, there are no rules, then you can stick your finger out and poke the person into the eye. You don't want to do it with any other finger, but if you do it just right, because you're not going to put your fist under your thumb under your fingers, because otherwise you'll break it on impact, you put it on the outside, and if you want, poke the eyes when you punch. It's a fun little thing. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about how I know things. Now, I will say it is very strange that we have to go through the semantics to get our answer with Krogunk as to what it eats, because once again, fighting types typically don't eat other Pokemon, but we may have an exception here. It states that it only fights to ensure its own survival and doesn't state a diet. So, since it is based on a poison dart frog, how about we look at what they eat? Poison dart frogs are carnivores, surviving on a diet of small insects. Things like fruit flies, termites, ants, young crickets, and some smaller species of beetles. They're excellent opportunistic hunters, relying on their long, sticky tongues to flash out and catch fast-moving prey in the blink of an eye. Thank you, Blue Planet Aquarium. How unfortunate for Cricketune being eaten by Quagsire and Croagunk. Well, I mean, it might actually explain why we don't really find crickets on here. As a side note, Croagunk also has dry skin as one of its common abilities, so it makes sense why they are here as well and not really anywhere else. We aren't done, though, because looking at the waterway, we find Magikarp, Barboach, and Remoraid. And since I honestly don't remember if we covered Remoraid, here we go! At least in previous editions, I don't know if we did. Remoraid is well known for its ability to shoot jets of water out of its mouth with incredible accuracy and distance. It uses its abdominal muscles to do so, often to shoot down prey such as Burmy out of the air. The water attack can reach its prey from over 300 feet, 100 meters away, even when the prey is moving or flying. Because of this, Remoraid is referred to as the sniper of the seas. When threatened, it can also shoot water to propel itself backward. Remoraid tends to travel by attaching to Mantine's fins or in large groups of its own kind. It attaches itself by using its dorsal fin, which acts like a suction pad. When attached to Mantine, it feeds on whatever the Mantine leaves behind, but will fight alongside it as well. A school of Remoraid is often seen working together and traveling with Mantine, helping it achieve its evolution into Mantine. Remoraid is a sea-dwelling Pokemon, traveling downstream from rivers, especially when evolution draws near. So, opportunistic omnivores, but prefer to eat bugs when given the chance, since Burmy is a bagworm. Got it. They are based on Remora for their relationship with the Mantike line and the Archerfish in their shooting capabilities, so that is no shocker in regards to their diet. What makes this weird is that we don't really find any insects here that it could take down. Because let's be real, Cricketune is not going down without a fight. So I propose the rainy environment is toiling up the mud underwater, keeping it murky, but also full of debris that would house macro-invertebrates that Magikarp, Remoraid, and Barboach can feast on. And occasionally maybe Barboach might try to eat the other two. Now, because I want to, I can bend the rules just a little bit to also include Tentacool, Tentacruel, and Gastrodon. The reason I do this is actually because this is a very unique environment with very few other marshes throughout all of Pokemon, which, while I won't paint a picture, I want to give you the following. Wooper and Quagsire are eating pretty much every other creature here. Honestly, Wooper put so much pressure on every other creature that they had to evolve, giving us Bibarel, Cricketune, Tentacruel, and Gastrodon. Bibarel and Cricketune force the hand of all but Do to become Roselia. Weasel makes things harder on the Shellos population as well, resulting in mass amounts of Shellos produced by the very few Gastrodon here. Because, if you didn't know, some species will have a ton of babies just to make their species survive. Think of jellyfish. There are hundreds, if not thousands, in their swarms, and they just keep having babies so that way when a sea turtle comes by and eats a ton of them, their species will continue to live on anyway. The Tentacruel honestly only make up 1% of the population here, meaning our Wooper and Quagsire, despite their incredibly high population, are eating ridiculous amount of Tentacool, culling their numbers. It makes it worse on the jellies since they have less sunlight that they use to help produce some of their attacks and abilities. They really are helpless as they can just float through here but are not made for this murky environment. Meanwhile, all of our fish get to thrive on all of the scraps produced by all of our other Pokemon, assuming that they aren't eaten in turn. But it's okay. The Wooper are just sleeping under the sediment in the water at night, and Quagsire kind of just waits for prey to fall into its mouth anyway, so the fish can steer clear for the most part and hopefully escape their imminent demise. Route 213. Offshore boulders from a jetty that becomes waves reaching the beach. A resort hotel overlooks the water. In a small house on the beach lives a single man who refers to himself as Dr. Footstep and, beautiful, the Pokewalker. The relic of a past that was desecrated from the grave for Pokemon Go. Here we have Wingull, Pelipper, Weasel, Floatzel, Shellos, Tentacruel, Magikarp, Remoraid, and then on land we have Chatot, and for some reason that made me think of the Pokerap, and I might one day I might do the Pokerap. You know what? Maybe I'll make that a members goal, and I'll just do the Poke Rap for for all the Pokemon. Oh my god. Chatot tongue is similar to a human's, allowing it to imitate human speech. I hate that. I despise it. It's genuinely the worst. It's like a horse with a dog's mouth. Suffer! Chatot is also able to mimic the cries of other Pokemon and uses this ability as a defense mechanism. Chatot uses the sounds it has learned and arranges them into its own melody, and flicks its tail to keep a rhythm. Chatots are even capable of understanding the meaning of the words they mimic the older and more experienced they become. It is diurnal and lives along bodies of water. Because I didn't know. Diurnal just means that it is active during the daytime and sleeps at night. I thought it was something else, but I wasn't sure. Now, it's just fancy city talk. Now, it is a parrot, but also a masked lovebird, more similarly to the lovebird. So, we must consult both sides just to be sure for their diets. Lovebirds eat seeds, berries, fruits, grains, grasses, leaf buds, and agricultural crops of corn, maize, and figs. Thank you, MSPCA.org. For parrots, they eat the same thing, but add in the occasional insect. Considering that there are no insects here, and again, Chatot is more similarly to the lovebird in physical composure, we will say that it does not eat bugs or any form of animal meat. Moving on from this route, not much to paint here. Valor Lakefront. One of the lakes that is symbolic of the water-rich Sinnoh region. There is an odd legend associated with it. A high-class restaurant is also located on a hill overlooking the lake. Salutes out to Joe Cat and his poor... Oh, was it a Torterra? No, it was a Grottle at the time. Oh, it's been too long since I've seen that sad little animation. Geodude, Graveler, Girafarig, which is an herbivore, Staravia, Bibarel, Kricketune, and finally, at least, we finally get Houndour. Because yes, Houndour did not naturally occur in the wild unless you went to Kanto in Generation 2, so I haven't been able to cover it. Houndour is an intelligent Pokemon that forms packs to hunt for prey and shows unparalleled teamwork. As seen in the Pokemon the Series episode Hour of the Houndour, it will not abandon a pack member who is sick. It communicates using various barks and howls. Barks are used to determine the location of a pack member during a hunt, which only they can understand, while howls are used as a declaration of ownership over territory. They are known to be loyal and obedient to their trainers. Houndour can typically be found around rough terrain, and as mentioned in Pokemon Sleep, Houndour is known to howl while it sleeps. It is believed that it is dreaming of hunting alongside the rest of its pack. So hold on, nothing about this Pokemon, despite it being a dark type, it shows any of the underhanded tactics that you would typically expect of other dark types. Like, I get why, like, Houndoom would be a dark type. It has its Fiery Breath, which actually secretly has poison inside of it that it uses to weaken its prey, then attack it. But Houndour, it's nothing to get caught up in, but I at least wanted to draw attention to that. Very easy though, we know that it's going to be an omnivore leaning more on the carnivore side for its diet. It is likely taking its shot at literally every Pokemon here, which would explain why, other than Geodude, we only find the evolutions of Pokemon here, because Geodude is actually not being hunted. It's a rock. Now, you might think Girafarig might have a problem, but they have the highest population here and are actually not weak Pokemon when you find them in the wild. This is only partial bias on my part, as even in real life, giraffes, my favorite animal, will absolutely kick the jaw off of a lion. Please, test my baby Girafarig. You will be eating your meals through a straw for the rest of your life. Route 214. The road joining Veilstone City and a lake is described as either wildly natural or simply a mess. There is a cave hewn into the sheer rock wall at the roadside. The hole was made by a ruined maniac. Zubat is back. We have stars from Valor here in Geodude, Graveler, Girafarig, Houndour, and Kricketune. Magikarp and Goldeen are in the water. Then we add in Stunky, who is getting chased by Houndour. And then we finally throw in two more rocks, Sudowoodo and Rhyhorn. And even though we have briefly mentioned Sudowoodo, let's round it out. It disguises itself as a tree and stands along paths to avoid being attacked. Sudowoodo's camouflage fails in the winter as its forelegs remain green, unlike real trees. Sudowoodo is very weak to water and hates it. So whenever it starts to rain, it will break their disguise and flee to the nearest source of shelter. Because it holds its position for so long, its arms have become supple yet strong. It is popular with the elderly, with available magazines and fans devoted to its arm angle and length. That should not make me uncomfortable, yet it does. But that kind of just goes back to the whole idea of bonsai trees. If you don't know what a bonsai tree is, it is the act of keeping a tree small. Technically, you can make any tree a bonsai tree, and I will note it's technically harming the tree because you are cutting growths that would otherwise still be healthy to keep it small. I did have one myself, and the problem with them is that they are very sensitive, or can be very sensitive. So when you take them out of a greenhouse, even if you try to put them into a similar zone or area, there is a chance that it's just going to perish. Sudowoodo can be found living in forests, sometimes sharing a habitat with Trevenant actually. As mentioned in Pokemon Sleep, it is known to keep its tree mimicry even while sleeping. However, it will occasionally get out of these stands and sleep instead on the ground. Now, we knew what its diet was, but it is interesting to note that we find a Pokemon that represents petrified wood more often as we get close to ruins near a forest. It actually kind of makes sense. Petrified wood. As we move on to Rhyhorn, it's said that its brain is very small, giving it a one-track mind. My god, Pokédex coming out with a steel chair! When it runs, it forgets why it started and continues until it falls asleep. However, it may recall the reason for demolishing something. Due to its short legs, it is inept at turning and can only run in straight lines. It does not care if obstacles get in the way, merely smashing through them or sending them flying, although it may feel the pain after a collision, a day after. This personality is how Rhyhorn expands its territory. It is powerful enough to shatter skyscrapers or mountains instantly after charging forward with head tackles. It lives in rough terrain, and its territory expands to about 6 miles. Okay, first off, once again, keep this thing far away from society for the sake of insurance and safety. I don't want to have to deal with insurance in the world of Pokemon. Rhyhorn's destroying buildings, Gyarados going on rampages, Bramblin hordes burying an entire city. Oh yeah, did we get coverage for the mass air toxification from coughing and wheezing? What do you mean I'm not allowed to have that because there's a factory nearby and it attracts them? That's what insurance is for! Being an adult is something else. So, Rhyhorn might be a little weird, a little kooky, if you would, in terms of what it eats. We clearly have a rhino here, but it is a rock. And most of our rock-based Pokemon eat, well, rocks, minerals, steel. According to Rockwood Conservation, I did not do that on purpose, that's just a coincidence, rhinos are herbivores who rely on a variety of plants for nourishment. In their natural habitat, these gigantic herbivores graze mostly on grass and the fruits and leaves of shrub and trees. As grazers, they eat continuously, rather than at specific times. So, even nature's tank is an herbivore. Honestly, a lot of creatures that don't eat other creatures develop some sort of interesting bodily functions or physical characteristics, more so than carnivores in my personal opinion. And many others will say that herbivores are fight or flight, but if they choose fight, you will die. A hoof to the gut, crushing, rabbits dislocating the jaws of foxes with their kicks, rhinos developing a thick hide and big horns to gore with, the list goes on and on. What do carnivores get? They get claws, they get teeth, speed and strength, whatever. Typically the same things in different forms. Not to disparage them though, I do love all animals even if some freak me out. Route 215. This area is always inundated by heavy rainfall. Only hardy trainers that can take the rain gather here. While we get the same gaggle of Pokemon as other areas, it is an interesting mix. We have Geodude, Ponyta, and Staravia, which make up most of the population here. Ponyta, again, only because it likes the mountainous areas. Then we also get Kricketune, Scyther, and their natural predators, Lickitung, which does prefer to eat bugs. Luckily, there aren't a lot of Lickitung here. But then I get a small surprise as we not only get Abra, but we get its evolution, Kadabra. A gold spoon does not work as an amplifier, and Kadabra is only half as strong without a spoon. Kadabra emits alpha waves strong enough to induce headaches. It can even cause clocks to run backwards, machines to malfunction, and delicate devices to cease functioning altogether. The waves increase further in strength the more danger Kadabra faces. By closing its eyes, it can double the number of alpha particles it emits. When it has a headache, the alpha waves become unusual. All of Kadabra's brain cells work in unison while it uses its powers. It sleeps while levitating, using its springy tail like a pillow. It can store up psychic energy inside its star in preparation for its evolution. There is a theory that Kadabra was born from a transformed human child who could not control his powers, and they live in urban areas. So, rewinding again. Alpha particles? Like, as in radiation? What? Now, according to U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, they only pose a serious threat if ingested or inhaled. But if you are a Pokemon trainer with a Kadabra, you're becoming a Fallout Ghoul in no time. That isn't just an old game thing, that is something that is talked about through Pokemon X and Y even. No wonder its brain gets massive. The Pokemon basically just has cancer, but like Wade Wilson somehow manages to make it a superpower and survive anyway. And why are Kadabra here? We can't just ignore that. Well, it's simply because Veilstone is right by here, and it has a bunch of special stones here. One of them being the meteorite that can change Deoxys into its many forms. And while meteorites are generally not radioactive, technically being considered to be less radioactive than Earth rocks on average thanks to info from Washington University, this little meteorite is definitely emitting something that is attracting Abra and Kadabra to be in the general area. Also, Kadabra's just eating berries just like Abra, so nothing else crazy is happening here. And Abra just gets to evolve within the city. Route 216. This mountainous road leads from Mount Coronet. Its constant snowfall and deep snowdrifts impede travelers. Zubat are likely just living in the caves nearby and wandering out at night as they always do to get their food. We get the Machoke training out here alongside Graveler. Noctowl is taking up its snowy owl life. Meditite are training and fasting as per usual, surviving on 1 berry a week. Sneasel is making a meal of you, your parents, and your eggs, making everybody a victim. And then we have 2 new Pokemon we have not discussed before. A snow-loving tree and a chilly little guy that's one of my favorites. Let's start with Snover though. Edible white berries grow along Snover's midsection. It usually grows the berries when spring approaches. Let's take a quick tangent real quick. Don't eat berries off of trees, and don't just randomly eat berries if you can't identify them properly and appropriately. I made that mistake once. I ate a poisonous berry. It did not kill me. That is not saying that you are allowed to do so. I ate it because I thought it was a berry I was allowed to eat, because I was told that an old friend would frequent the area a lot, and so they used to eat the berries all the time in the area. I'm like, oh, these must be the berries. I think these are poisonous, but I'll try it anyway. Ate it, immediately spat it out because my body identified it as poison because of the incredibly, horribly, god-awful, bitter taste that it had. So, at least my body defended me. In Galar, packs of its natural predator, Galarian Darumaka, enjoy eating the berries produced by Snover. This results in Abomasnow often chasing them away in order to protect it. Snover lives on snowy peaks in warm seasons, but migrates lower as the weather cools. A curious Pokemon, it often approaches people and can be found inspecting footprints in the snow. There are stories of Snover visiting human settlements, often bonding with the children there. Snover can sink its feet into the snow to absorb water. This helps cool down its body temperature. As mentioned in the sleep-style decks, Pokemon tend to sneak up upon the sleeping Snover to consume the berries it grows, and it is unaware of this while it is asleep. This all makes it very clear that Snover have adapted to this life in the cold as conifers have in order to outcompete others as a regular plant. Though, it now has to worry about other Pokemon coming after the berries that it grows on its body. It also still migrates if the weather gets too cold for it to withstand. After all, you can't absorb water if everything is frozen to ice. I highly recommend, if you want to hear a ridiculous amount of detail regarding our grass types, go check out my video explaining every single grass type and their real life counterparts, in addition to some really cool plant science. Except Kartana's not included in that one because I somehow managed to miss it, but there is a video explaining every single Ultra Beast! Yay! Moving on. As it evolved from Glalie as a body of rock, Snorunt may also be made of rock. In Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, defeating a Snorunt, Glalie, or Frostlass will yield some Snorunt fur, suggesting the cloak is made of fur. Well adapted to life in cold climates, it subsists on snow and ice and can survive temperatures as low as -150 degrees Fahrenheit. Snorunt is also a social creature. living and traveling with other snowruns in groups of 5. The group can live together in harmony while residing underneath giant leaves. It can be found in caves, particularly when the outside lacks snow or areas with heavy snowfall. Despite this, the snowrun population in Alola shows it can thrive in some places with warm weather. Additionally, it has been known to visit human dwellings. There is a legend that any home a snowrun visits and lives near will prosper for generations. There is a tradition where houses would leave a lump of ice made from pure water for snowruns to have when visiting. Playing with snowruns is a favorite childhood memory for rich people who live in cold areas. It is believed that if snowrun shows up during the night, they will cause heavy snow to appear in the morning. So there's a lot of legends regarding this little guy. And admittedly, I love snowruns. I would give all mortal possessions, surrender all mortal possessions to snowruns. It is arguably one of my favorite ice-type Pokemon. It is cute, and then it evolves into either the floating head yokai that eats whatever it finds, or the Yukiona, which will primarily hunt men and turn them into popsicles to then eat their frozen souls. But don't worry, they aren't here. Only the cute little snowruns. Honestly, life here is actually thriving here easier because of the high population of Snover providing berries to every Pokemon that eats them. And then Sneasel takes advantage of all this jolly cooperation and eats whatever eggs it can find. Oh, and Noctowl too. It is absolutely trying to not only eat Zubat, but also Sneasel, Meditite, and probably Snowruns. In fact, Noctowl is a massive victim of Sneasel, explaining why they are here and not Hoot Hoot. That, and it is a harsh environment after all, you're gonna need some thicker plumage. Route 217, snow blows down from Mount Coronet and grows into a harsh, ceaseless blizzard. Be prepared for the worst. Same as before, without the rocks, add in Medicham since it is harsher here, and then we get another one of my favorite ice types of all time, which eats roots, mushrooms, berries, all of which it can dig up with its very sensitive nose, being Swinub. Basically, we just add another friend to the group and another Pokemon that is prey to Sneasel. So nothing really to talk about here, although Mount Coronet is looming over me, and it is terrifying the closer I get to having to explain everything within. Now, we do have a cutie lakefront, but there is nothing different on this route than any other route that we've talked about. Even the encounter rates are the same as the previous one, so we're not going to talk about it. We do jump back down the mountain and land in Route 218. Despite its shortness, this road is revered by fishing enthusiasts as a great yet little-known fishing spot. We literally walk through it all the time, and it's part of our main route. How do we not know? We have Wingull, Floatzel, Shellos, and Gastrodon West, Chatot, Tentacool, Tentacruel, Magikarp, Finian, and 2 new Pokemon, starting with Mr. Mime, which we will simply round out the info for since we stated it does not eat animal meat. From birth, this Pokemon is an excellent pantomime. As it matures, it gains the ability to solidify air molecules by vibrating its fingertips. This ability allows it to create invisible objects with its gestures. It punishes those who interrupt its act or are not impressed by slapping them. In the TCG, Mr. Mime is shown to be adept at rock climbing. It is usually very rare, but can be found in suburban areas. As mentioned in Pokemon Sleep, it is hard to tell whether Mr. Mime is either sleeping or pretending to be asleep due to its masterful pantomime skills. As a note, those blue rings on its head are not weirdly shaped hair follicles. They are actually just described as blue growths, which is very unsettling. The other Pokemon here did find out that this is a fantastic fishing spot, as the kitty comes strutting in and we find that it is Glameow. Once again, all cats are supposed to be obligate carnivores in our world, but let's give this Pokemon its due for its details. Glameow has sharp claws and a powerful helical tail, like a helix, and its eyes are capable of using hypnotic powers. It tends to be spiteful, fickle, and even cowardly, having a tendency to hook its claws into the nose of its trainer if it is not fed. When it's happy and purring with affection, it demonstrates movements with its tail like a dancing ribbon. As it has a domesticated quality, it tends to appear in urban areas. Glameow is rather popular amongst trainers due to its fickle nature, and is also known to be a very cunning opponent to face in battle, which occurs only if it was provoked. Because of its craven nature, Glameow has a high chance of fleeing trainers when encountered in the wild. Do you know why it is popular despite that fickle nature, because we as a species so desperately want companionship and cooperation. And if it isn't with humans, we seek that friendship with pretty much anything else that we can find it in, including animals. I am no better, as I feel sad when my own animal companions decide that they don't want my attention, and I let them go because I don't want them to feel uncomfortable or unhappy, and I don't want to force interactions. I respect their boundaries. Nevertheless, hypnotic eyes are incredibly useful to attract fish and then get them on the hook for a nice meal. Honestly, the fish population is why we have most of our Pokemon here, except Chatot and Mr. Mime. Chatot does have a nice forest line nearby, and Mr. Mime gets to have a nice, easy, relatively captive audience, as we have all the fishermen here, since they like it to be nice and quiet as to not scare the fish, but get entertained by our Mr. Mime here in nice silence. Route 219, a beautiful white sand beach only 5 seconds on foot from Sandgem Town. A pleasant breeze flows from the sea. In this route, I'm going to start including all Pokemon that are in the water, despite only being able to get the Super Fishing Rod after the Elite Four, but again, only for this route. There will be some exceptions later. Tentacruel, Wingull, and Pelipper are all here, found floating on the surface or just above the surface. In the water, we find Magikarp and Finneon. Then we go deeper to find Gyarados, which is eating everything, Clamperl, who is grabbing whatever fish it can on the seafloor, and Lumineon. Lumineon are known to travel in schools, and although it can be found near the water's surface, it usually makes its home deep in the ocean, where it walks along the seafloor using the fins on its chest. This behavior helps it avoid predators, and it's actually very similar to how Relicanth exists with coelacanths. Lumineon attracts its prey by flashing the patterning on its wing-like fins, although this behavior also attracts ferocious fish Pokemon that Lumineon itself is prey to. It typically competes with Lantern for food such as Staryu and Starmie. Now, I doubt it's eating Clamperl, but all the other fish are on the docket. This also indirectly tells us that Gyarados are getting attracted to Lumineon and eating them up when available. It is barely 4 feet and a little over 50 pounds, or 24 kilograms after all, so that is a nice meal for Gyarados. Very big boy. Route 220. The sea here is perfect for swimming with gentle winds and tides. There are sandbars for resting as well. Same as before, but now we add in Chinchou and Lantern, which are eating every other fish down here, as they are based on the football angler fish. Unless, of course, a Sharpedo were to arrive, or a Furlish and Unova, which both do eat this Pokemon. Another route without much of a picture to paint. Route 221, a straight path hemmed by green grass and sparse stands of trees. At the end of the path stands the gateway to Pal Park. Sudowoodo, Girafarig, Wingull, Pelipper, Roselia, Floatzel, and all the aforementioned water Pokemon are here. And then we get Stunky and its evolution, Skuntank. Skuntank is known for its noxious fluid, which smells dreadful. It can spray this fluid over 160 feet or 50 meters away. And the longer it allows this liquid to ferment within its body, the more powerful the smell. Unlike its pre-evolution and real-life skunks, which spray fluids from their rears, Skuntank sprays its fluid from its tail tip, which can open. Very uncomfortable. The stench of Skuntank's fluid varies depending on its diet. Skuntank prefers to nest in large, prickly bushes in heavily wooded areas and digs holes in the ground to make its nest. This is a form of safety. If they don't like prickly bushes, then they aren't going to be a threat to you and your home. While Skuntank can use its poisonous fluids to take down prey, ironically, it cannot handle the smell of its own stench, abandoning potential defeated meals as a result. So yeah, all of that from its tail. Honestly, just kind of imagine it's no different than the way that we have to pee or poop, where we have a separate way for that to happen. Meanwhile, things like birds have a singular place, which is their cloaca. So maybe Skuntank has 3 routes, and that is more than enough for me to delve into. I don't want to go any further. Now, I do feel like I've been lacking a lot of picture painting, if I have to be honest here, but a lot of these have been a lot of the same interactions repeated over and over again, and I just don't want to be repetitive. Though it is strange that we see Skuntank here specifically. The only real explanation could be that between Floatzel taking up all the fish and Roselia fighting back, Stunky would have less food to eat. meaning that it had to evolve into Skuntank in order to be strong enough to hunt down stronger prey. I mean, the thing even gets Flamethrower from that tail as an ability. So, yeah, it's gotta be these reasons.
Route 222, a sandy beach extends from the road. The beach is busy with avid fishermen happily casting at the water's edge. A man who loves fishing lives near here. There is also a man who will compare sizes of caught fish. In the water, we do see Magikarp, the Tentacool line, the Wingull line, and Remoraid as we return to the normal rules. On land, though, we have those Wingull and Pelipper flying overhead while we get a gaggle of Pokemon new and old. This includes Chatot, Gastrodon East, Luxio, Mr. Mime, Electabuzz, which does consume electricity, and some new evolutions with Magneton and Purugly. In some cases, commonly seen in 3D games such as Pokemon Snap, the Magnemite will not be connected at all, remain in a triangular formation at rest, and are able to freely move within each other's vicinity to form other patterns. In this case, all three Magnemite have screws on them. The magnetic forces that hold the three Magnemite together are powerful enough to dry up all moisture and raise the temperature by 3.6 degrees Fahrenheit within a radius of 3,300 feet. That would be 2 degrees Celsius and 1 kilometer. It can also be disruptive to electronic devices and induce earaches, which is probably due to like tinnitus related stuff, the high pitch. It uses powerful radio waves to help it study the surrounding area. If you thought Magnemite was a menace, it only got worse. All moisture within a kilometer, and it raises the temperature. It might seem like a very small amount, but over a kilometer and at an even 3.6 Fahrenheit or 2 degrees Celsius is actually a massive difference environmentally. It's like the seas or oceans raising by a single degree every couple of years. This sheer span, area, depth, volume, so on and so forth, all increasing even a little bit evenly across the board causes massive massive dangerous differences. That's why coral is bleaching. And this is just one Magneton, let alone if a swarm appears. But back to Magneton and its information. Magneton's anti-gravitational powers enable it to fly through the air. Being composed of 3 Magnemite, it is about 3 times as powerful electrically, though not 3 times as intelligent. Even though Magneton is a mechanical creature, it still has the need to eat. As seen in the Pokemon the Series episode, The Poke Spokesman, food for Magneton consists of electrical currents. It is usually found in rough terrain, often near power plants, which again goes back to why we see Magneton at places like the Fuego Ironworks. Even though that's an ironworks, not a normal power plant. They likely use electricity anyway. When sunspots flare up, Magneton tends to appear more often, presumably due to the changes in the sun's magnetic field. Basically, this means that they kind of combine by chance, typically. When rain clouds form, it also gathers in high areas, like elevation-wise, that are prone to lightning strikes. As seen in the 11th chapter of Pokemon Adventures, it possesses the ability to form its electricity into both platforms and barriers. As seen in Pokemon Horizons this series episode, The Future I Choose, it can cause interference with phone and internet signals. In An Unexpected Picnic, a herd of Magneton can produce an EMP that can destroy computer software. Despite its modern artificial appearance, carvings depicting Magneton have been discovered at the ruins of Alph. One was even shown in the flashback of the Great War of Kalos, specifically more in the Pokemon Generations episode, The Redemption, as there was not just Magnemite there, indicating that it has been around for at least 3,000 years. And, oh yeah, if you want a complete timeline of the Great Pokemon War and my fun little theories behind it and how it relates to Unova and the Great Heroes up there, go check out my video on that because I'm incredibly happy with how that turned out. Magneton is known to sleep with its 3 linked Magnemite either stuck together or drifting apart by a strong magnetic force. It is theorized that its magnetism is unstable while it is asleep. Once again, though, we have to ask, why is it here? Simple. Volkner and his electric type gym is actually close by. Everything here is run by solar energy, meaning this area gets the most sunlight in the region theoretically, and if those solar flares hit, we're getting plenty of Magneton. Now again, we also get Purugly here. Despite appearing very sluggish, it will not be reluctant to attack if angered and can be quite fast. Purugly attempts to make itself look larger and more intimidating by cinching its waist with its forked tail.
It barges, wait, hold on, wait, no, hold on. I didn't realize that at first. So it's basically taking its tail, wrapping it around its waist, squeezing it like a quarter? What is that thing that they do in the medieval time? Whatever, you know what I mean. And corset, that's what it's called. It's basically doing a corset, and it's making its chest look larger. Okay, I never knew that. Now, it barges into the nest of other Pokemon and frightens them off so Perugly can claim the nest as its own. It does this by glaring with its eyes ceaselessly. It can be found in both urban areas and heavily wooded forests. Despite its disrespectful and scary nature, it is rather popular. And the reason is due to its beautiful fur, more comfortable than even velveteen. So, its diet and our human need, desperation even, to make it love us is unchanged. Honestly, the only new interaction here is through Luxio and the Glamio line. It's fairly clear that Luxio is hunting down Glamio, and Floatzel is much faster, making the available food for a much slower and weaker Glamio difficult, as it is also being hunted. So, it had no choice but to evolve into Perugly. And, of course, all of our felines here are eating Chatot and our other birds, and might even eat each other, honestly. Route 223. A marine route that requires travelers to navigate around jutting rocks and sandbars. Honestly, the only Pokemon of note here is Mantike, otherwise it is about the same as our usual watery crowd. Despite its appearance, Mantike is an effective swimmer. Its antennae are used to sense ocean currents. Mantike is a friendly Pokemon that can be found approaching boats and swimming near the ocean's surface with schools of Remoraid. It often works together with Remoraid to repel attackers. Spending time with the Remoraid schools will eventually cause Mantike to evolve into Mantine. Due to its friendly nature, Mantike are very easy to tame. They are also super popular in beach activities involving swimming tours. And the Mantike that live in Galar appear to move slower due to the cold waters of the region. We do know that Mantine is eating other fish, so Mantike wouldn't be any different. It is very interesting to learn that by spending time with Remoraid, it evolves though, chalking it up as another Pokemon that does not follow the normal level up evolution process unless they are just helping each other generally survive, which aids the Remoraid later on, as it can then rely on the Mantine, as it helped it as a, well, pre-evolution Mantike. Now, we are going to jump around a little bit, because technically Victory Road is right here, but there are 7 other routes that we can discuss, and we haven't even talked about Mount Coronet yet. Plus, we can still add Stark Mountain. Ignore the fuddle there. Now, 6 of these routes are all in the Battle Zone. It is a sub-region that does have naturally occurring wild Pokemon, and they are very similar from route to route, while also being incredibly powerful, more powerful in a higher level than what you typically find before the Elite Four. So I will highlight what is relevant through these areas instead of saying the same thing again and again. You can thank me for saving your time by watching one of my other videos, and also for saving both of our sanities for that matter. In the waters, we are now getting Love Disc and Octillery. As for Love Disc, we've already discussed it in the past. It's eating small worms, crustaceans, plant matter, insects, and detritus that gets flushed out by surrounding forests by rainfall. So it's not eating other fish Pokemon and instead is being preyed upon. As for Octillery, there are yellow bumps on its rock-hard head and yellow suction cups on each of its 8 tentacles. These suction cups and yellow bumps are smaller on a female Octillery, and it uses these tentacles for manipulating objects, and these suction cups give it strong gripping power. Because of this, it is very hard for it to be blown away. Octillery is a relaxed Pokemon who loves fuss from its trainer. Even though it is more docile when domesticated, it can be very stubborn at times in the wild. It instinctively sneaks into rocky holes or pots, and if it gets sleepy, it steals the nest of a fellow Octillery. When threatened, it will spurt ink from its mouth to cover itself before escaping, allowing it to protect itself and its young from danger. Octillery's ink obscures vision and contains substances that dull predators' sense of smell. Octillery also uses this ink on its prey before its suction cups hold the prey tightly. Its ink can also be used as a cooking ingredient, which I've heard that like squid ink or like octopus ink noodles are supposed to be absolutely delicious based on how they're cooked, but I have yet to try it myself. Besides ink though, Octillery sometimes uses its rock-hard head on its foes, and Octazooka was originally its signature move, but other Pokemon can now inherit it through breeding. Now, it is normally found in oceans and caves, and for a long time people refused to believe Octillery was an evolution of Remoraid because of the extreme physical differences between the two. It is also thought to be a distant relative to Omastar. In Pokemon Snap, it is seen to be preyed on by a Survivor, which I freaked about in the last video, so I'm not going to freak out about here. Honestly, it's no different from regular octopi. The only difference, though, is that real-life octopi don't headbutt creatures. Instead, they might be more apt to just full-on punch them, as they just kind of roll themselves up and then wha-bam! Which is hilarious and scary, since it has to be a pretty strong punch to move like that underwater. We can assume Octillery is going to prey on anything that it can, like grab, fish-wise, that is smaller than it, besides Remoraid and the Mantike line, considering their relation with each other. We know that Sharpedo will also eat these Pokemon. I only mention that because Sharpedo was found in one of the previous route we talked about, but was beyond our level cap. We will also notice, if you look at a lot of these routes, that we are seeing our grass-type lines of Bellsprout and Oddish. Lots of combat, lots of waterside land, and all of that will actually result in nutrient-rich soil, in which case these are thriving in, our plants. Now, the Rattata line and Spearow line appear to be doing what they normally do and eat everything, though Spearow and Fearow are very much hunting the rats amongst other Pokemon and eating any carrion, also benefiting from any battles that have occurred. Skuntank does make a presence here, and does as it always has. Oddly enough, though, on some routes we do get Banette. Being driven to life by a powerful grudge, it keeps its life force safely in its body by the means of its zipped-up mouth. If unzipped, it would lose its energy. It lays curses on others by using its body as a voodoo doll and sticking pins into itself. That we hardly, if not ever, actually see, and that is scary, and I love it as a horror fan. It lives in garbage dumps and dark alleys, where it searches for the person that threw it away before it became a Pokemon. It is said that treating it with enough care will satisfy its grudge and will turn it back into a stuffed toy, which, adorably enough, we do see with a Nurse Joy at one point. As mentioned in its sleep-style dex, Banette apparently laughs happily while sleeping. It is believed that a sleeping Banette is remembering a time where it was loved and cared for. It's okay, Banette. I love and care for you. I love ghosts so much. In other words, though, it isn't eating anything, but having plenty of fun putting curses on others. This is also a perfect time for me to tell you that this month I actually plan on covering the Pokemon Space World demo, the beta sprites that all occurred in it, and the lost Pokemon from it, such as Shuppet and Banette, being far more voodoo-like in their original sprites. So look out for that. I don't intend to cover the, Terra Leak beta Pokemon at any point. I don't like the idea of that. I'm sorry. It's just, it feels wrong considering that was done, not in a good way. People, it wasn't a leak, it was someone hacked the info, which is not okay, because there was a lot of people that were hurt by it. Or at least there was a lot of people that could be hurt by it. Now, along some of the other routes, you do throw in Poliwag and Poliwhirl, first eating water vegetation, then expanding into bugs and fish. Once it does evolve into Poliwhirl, we add in Spheal, Celio, Seal, and Dugong, which of course are eating fish, maybe some birds, and are overall competing with each other for food in these colder waters. Maybe even hunting and eating each other for that matter, though that is a risky endeavor. As for fish, we are getting Horsey and Seadra, making whirlpools to tire their prey before devouring them, which includes Magikarp and Relicanth until a Gyarados rampages through the waters. Now I will slow down now, as routes 227, 228, and 229 are rather unique and deserve a little bit more attention, especially as we get a few more new Pokemon that we haven't talked about here. Though 230 is still run-of-the-mill, we at least get to add in Golduck. Route 227. A rugged and steep mountain path where vision is limited by steadily falling volcanic ash. Before I even talk about this, I'm going to pay homage to Torkoal, who I left behind in the one area it spawns in naturally within Hoenn. I don't remember the commentator's name. I know that they loved the video, but they also like, oh, we missed Torkoal. It gets forgotten again. I am not forgetting Torkoal. I am not. I like Torkoal. So we're putting them in here, even though they're not on this route. So, and actually, it's not even here in Sinnoh at all, but I'm going to talk about it because I like Torkoal. It lives in mountains and volcanic areas where it looks for large deposits of coal. It uses the coal to fill the hollow spaces in its shell and then burns it for energy. Because coal is Torkoal's source of energy, it becomes weak and immobile once it runs out of coal to burn. If the fire inside of its shell goes out, it will die. A Torkoal is healthy if the smoke spouting from its shell has tremendous velocity. When it blows out smoke from its nostrils and the top of its back, it sounds like a locomotive horn. If it is attacked, it blows black smoke out of its nostrils before fleeing. So, nice and easy. It likes to eat coal, and in the areas it lives in, it had no real predators to deal with, so it gets to live nice, happily, and free. I also feel like it wouldn't taste very good. At best, it would probably taste very, very strong, sulfury eggs. Back to what is actually en route to 27, though. Fearow, Golbat, Graveler, Skarmory, Banette, Rhyhorn, and their evolutions. Rhydon is a physically powerful Pokemon. It is recorded as being able to topple buildings with a sweeping blow of its tail, and its horn can bore through solid rock and shatter diamonds. Rhydon sharpens their horns by clashing them together. Its armor-like hide protects it from heat and physical blows. It is stated to be capable of passing unscathed through streams of magma, which are 3,600 degrees Fahrenheit, and withstanding a direct blow from a cannonball without being harmed. However, because of this tough hide, it is insensitive. Despite its well-developed brain, it can be forgetful. Rhydon lives in rough terrain, like in caves or on top of mountains, and due to its evolution allowing Rhydon to walk on two legs, it can expand its territory to more than a Rhyhorn's original habitat limit. This basically means that Rhyhorn is able to make its home in unlikely environments for other creatures while also still eating plenty of plant matter itself. The same actually goes for Numel as it evolves into Camerupt. Its body contains amounts of molten lava of 18,000 degrees Fahrenheit, 10,000 Celsius, which Camerupt voluntarily erupts out of its hump if it's angered. Otherwise, its humps erupt automatically every 10 years. As shown in the Pokemon this series Ruby and Sapphire episode Candid Camerupt, it can become uncontrollably angry when it is struck in the face. It lives in the craters of volcanoes. Now, with all of that heat and ash, we do have one other Pokemon here that we have talked about only in the Burned Mansion that is sucking all of this up for their own nutrients, wheezing, and actually mixing it within their body. All while in the water, we have Poliwag, Poliwhirl, Magikarp, Gyarados, Barboach, and Whiscash, which Whiscash also just kind of eats anything that comes near it, except for Gyarados, of course. So let's do ourselves a favor and paint a picture here with these unique interactions. Volcanic ash rains down from the sky, pitch black snow of its own as it falls and layers the ground throughout the day. It's much warmer here as we find ourselves close to an active volcano. Magma. The blood of the earth freely flowing and providing heat to anyone who dares to make their lives in such an environment that is supplemented not by clean air, but rather sulfur dioxide. Here we find the extremes of Pokemon species, the only ones specifically adapted to live in such a harsh land. Graveler, being made of rock and stone, roll through the mountain, coming down every morning in hopes of finding some rocks covered in moss. There's just enough heat and moisture at the bottom to help the moss thrive, and they know it. As they roll down, they pass by wheezing that breathes in the noxious fumes of the volcano, granting this strange creature life beyond our own. And in turn, as it exhales, it releases toxins that mix within its body, making the air here even harsher. Graveler continues to roll, passing the Fearow and Skarmory flying above, both being scavengers, though the Skarmory are far more rare. They command the skies and will act as a grim reaper for any creature unlucky enough to fall before it, or to be seen as a possible meal. Rolling, Graveler moves faster and faster, picking up speed to the point of being blinding to the naked eye, all until it rolls down the wrong path in its uncontrolled movement and is struck off the mountain. We then see Rhyhorn, protecting its territory and able to withstand consuming some ash as it devours fields of vegetation that it kept lively from the consistent nutrients left behind by other plants and Pokemon that have burned and decayed here, enriching the soil further. Though Rhyhorn rears its head to find a contender, Numel. These Numel are a problem despite their fire typing, as they command the earth in a similar manner to Rhyhorn while also consuming the same vegetation. They both learn Bulldoze at roughly the same level. They both become enraged when denied food, so as the two stare at each other, they stamp their feet. The earth around them rumbles in response, and battles ensue for food and territory. The winner in this match is irrelevant. Both Pokemon exist in similar numbers as they come to blows with each other regularly. This in turn causes both to evolve, as Rhydon and Camerupt make up nearly half of the population here. Rhydon charges on 2 feet, legs more powerful than before, as it grabs the Camerupt, prepared to flip it through the air. Though, Camerupt shifts its own incredible weight and blasts the Rhydon point blank with its erupting volcano, spreading more soot and ash into the air. The clash continues on. Flying Pokemon such as Golbats are even caught in the crossfire as they may attempt to take a sneaky bite at a Pokemon here. Territorial battles are a regular occurrence, and this will always result in the loser being eaten by our carrion birds of Fearow and Skarmory. If a dispute doesn't occur, there is of no consequence, for the waters here hold bountiful food. Poliwag and Poliwhirl are good meals that fatten themselves up regularly, especially Poliwhirl as it preys on the Magikarp and Barboach similar to our birds. The only difference here, though, is that these fish are sought after by far too many predators and decided that they have had enough, evolving into Whiscash and Gyarados. The Whiscash generate earthquakes as the Gyarados creates explosive beams of energy. Both rampaging here will only ensure that the volcanoes will never lie dormant here ever again, as tectonic plates scrape time and time again, clashing as they release their own eruptive energy and continue our cycle of Pokemon and volcanic environment. All for Whiscash to lay itself on the ground and wait until food comes to it, and for the Gyarados to dive deeper into the waters or depart to larger bodies of water fit with higher populations that can support its appetite. I love when an environment comes together. Route 228. This rough path is harshly raked by a horizontally blowing sandstorm driven by strong winds off the sea. We have the same Pokemon in the water. Meanwhile, on land, we get Diglett, Dugtrio, Rhydon, Cacnea, Cacturn, and Hippowdon. And if you're like me, you're wondering where Hippopotas is. Maniac Tunnel, it turns out, you know, the one that is man-made. So, to be fair, I will talk about Hippopotamus here as well, which I refuse to say correctly other than the very first time because I love Hippopotamus too much. But let's talk about Cacturn first, because we've never talked about them. Cacturn is a nocturnal Pokemon that rarely moves during the day, which allows it to hold moisture at night. It searches for prey or follows travelers until they become exhausted. Prior to Gen 5, Needle Arm was its signature move. It has lived in deserts for so long that its blood has transformed into sand. I don't like that, but that little detail tells us something important about Cacnea. It is not a plant, but rather a Pokemon that mimics cacti in order to attract Pokemon to it. And yes, that is obvious if you read Cacnea's Pokédex, but there is still a significant difference between a plant that eats other creatures, like Carnivine, and a creature that mimics a plant in order for it to eat other creatures. We do even get to see Cacnea blink, and the shell cactus itself does not change. So that visually supports just how creepy this duo Pokemon can be as they continue to hunt anything that moves in the desert. Hippopotamus spends its time bathing in sand and avoids water at all costs. It covers itself in sand as a protective measure against germs and expels sand instead of sweat. What is with sweat in Pokemon being weird or different or flavored or whatever? Anyway, when it walks through the sand, it shuts its nostrils but keeps its mouth open, swallowing any sand and prey along the way. It removes excess sand in its body from its nostrils, which it also does when angered or excited. Hippopotamus is more active during the day and burrows into sand during the night to avoid the cold. It prefers to travel in groups of 10, and despite its large and heavy appearance, it may remain undetected due to how well it hides in the sand. Well, that all makes it pretty easy, though that goes against completely what real hippos actually eat, and that is primarily short grass alongside fruit, leaves, and aquatic plants, as they are herbivores. Though, just like everything else, if it is in need of nutrients, it will eat what it needs to in order to survive. And I'm gonna be real, hippos are incredibly powerful creatures, so just do not mess with them. I admire and fear them, just like the great Canada moose. Hippowdon, its evolution, is short-tempered, easily provoked into violence, and may hold its mouth agape as a display of strength and intimidation, if you really want to go there. Hippowdon's jaws are capable of crushing cars. Hippowdon stores sand in its body, which is used to create twisters when attacking. Excess sand is expelled out of the ports on Hippowdon's back and nostrils to create room for fresh sand for it to ingest in order for it to stay healthy. It has a symbiotic relationship with Dwebble, which clears any stones stuck in its ports, while the Hippowdon cares for the Dwebble, helping it in exchange. It's very similar to like the alligator and the cleaner bird that picks its teeth. It's like, oh, I'll protect you, clean me please. Drapion are known to stay away from Hippowdon, so that probably makes it very clear that Scorpy and Drapion are known to be prey of them, or of the Hippowdon species, and Hippotapapatapus. It typically lives in deserts, but can also survive in swampy terrain. Now, again, it is very nice to actually see a very clear cooperation between Pokemon, but there is one detail that makes me afraid of Hippowdon even more, as this Pokemon is 6'7" long, or 2 meters, and its massive mouth can open to be 7 feet or 2 meters when wide open. Its mouth literally opens to be larger than it. Unless the measurement of a Pokemon like Hippowdon is not length and it is height, in which case that is a very large Pokemon, even larger than I expected, and I don't know what to do with myself anymore. Because, you know, I'm sorry. I am 5'6", and if you want the calculation, that's 170 centimeters. I would fit into Hippowdon's mouth while standing straight up, even if I was on the tips of my toes. So, stay away from me, please. I will give you watermelons to keep you happy, my dear hippo. But despite all this info, there is not that great of an interaction to paint a picture with, so we will move on to briefly talk about Route 229, a seaside path that makes its way through wildly growing trees and plants. And here we find the greatest level of species variation, more than any other singular area or route we have ever seen before, and will probably ever see again. Pidgey, Oddish, Gloom, Bellsprout, Weepinbell, and then we get a bunch of bugs. Scyther, Pinsir, Ledian, Ariados, Beautifly, Dustox, Volbeat, Illumis, Thorn, Roselia to be pollinated, and Perugly for some reason, which can actually be explained by the population of Wingull and Pelipper who are found while surfing, alongside Surskit and Masquerain, and of course Magikarp, Gyarados, Goldeen, and Seaking. I'm not counting how many there are, I probably should. 23 different Pokemon are on this route. On a singular route in a singular area. Mount Coronet has quite a few Pokemon, but as a collective, I don't think Mount Coronet even has 23 different Pokemon. This one area has 23. That aside, let's talk about Masquerain though. Masquerain's 4 wings allow it to fly in any direction and hover, but it cannot fly when its wings are wet. As shown in its official artwork and the TCG, the wings are actually translucent. Additionally, rainy weather causes its antennae to become heavy and droop. Yes, those big eyes, angry eyes are antennae, which is used to scare away, well, prey, which is used to scare away both predators that may want it into thinking it's a different Pokemon, and then paralyzing prey into not moving so that way it can eat them. In order to protect its wings and antennae, this Pokemon will shelter under trees or the eaves of houses. It also lives on the water's edge. With it living near the water's edge, we can safely assume that its diet has not changed and it is eating other insects still, just like it would as a Surskit. We can make this area nice and easy as we are full of insects that are preying on each other, sipping nectar, eating pollen, devouring plants, or are being eaten by the small population of Pidgey here, which somehow are not being wiped out by Weepinbell or Ariados. By the way, this is also the first place where Pinsir, or Pinsir as people would like me to actually say it, is actually seen naturally. So let's talk about that terrifying scarab beetle Pokemon thing. Pinsir can use its pincers to crush, toss, bludgeon, or tear opponents, lift things twice its weight, and shatter lungs. That's not terrifying at all. Captured prey is kept in place by the piercing thorns and sheer strength of Pinsir's horns and will not be released until they are torn in half. That is shown early on in the Pokemon anime as we get to see a black and white visual of Ash's Metapod crack and then get ripped apart. Though that was just Ash's imagination. Pinsir's horns are actually quite flexible as depicted in the Pokemon Monsters card trading cards, where they have a wide range of motion. In addition to hunting prey, it's shown in the Pokemon the Series episode a sappy ending that it enjoys tree sap. Pinsir lives deep in the temperate forests and jungles, where it burrows underground or hides in the treetops on nights cold enough to render it immobile. In Pokemon Sleep, Pinsir burrows itself into the ground to sleep during cold nights, but its pincers can be seen sticking out of the ground as it slumbers. In Alola, it has a rivalry with Vikavolt and gets along with Heracross. Pinsir are known to judge each other based on their pincers, and the pincers determine its popularity with the opposite gender based on how much more thick and impressive it looks. That felt gross. Though, yes, it is eating bugs and some sap for that matter. The only Pokemon here that Roselia is getting along with, since it wants to pollinate and does not want its flowers taken, would actually likely be Surskit and Masquerain. Volbeat and Illumis for sure, as they are also here, and maybe Beautifly and Dustox. Otherwise, this whole place is just absolute chaos. It is an eat or be eaten land, and probably the most terrifying way, since the smallest insect here is Surskit, that stands at about half a meter or 1 foot 8 inches. And considering the environment, there are tons of bugs and plants here. Remember, we only get percentages. We don't know what the true population is on any route whatsoever. But before I continue freaking out, how about we move on? We'll drop by a cute little place known as Seabreak Path, which leads us to Flower Paradise, with the special event allowing us to meet Shaman. Now, Shaman eats berries and serves as a pollinator for rare flowers within the world of Pokemon known as the Gracidia flowers. I have talked about Shaman in so many videos at this point, but I can't complain. It is a very cute little hedgehog. Though despite that, it isn't really part of any ecosystem. It finds Gracidia flowers, turns to its sky form, and then flies. Wherever it lands is where more Gracidia flowers are said to then bloom. In other words, they are seed carriers and pollinators for rare flowers of gratitude. Stark Mountain, a rugged, seemingly indestructible rock mountain that is thickly blanketed by the volcanic ash it spews. Inside the mountain, fissures in spilled and hardened lava from enormous caverns. Honestly, outside of adding an Onyx who is creating tunnels and the slug malign who lives through being like sharks and continually moving forever lest their skin hardens, this is no different than our last volcano-y area. In fact, that route is really close to here, so that actually explains a lot. Though, since I haven't had the chance, let's talk about Magcargo since it was added here. Magcargo's internal body temperature can reach over 18,000 degrees Fahrenheit or 10,000 Celsius, causing it to evaporate water on contact. Flames circulate throughout its body, occasionally spouting through cracks in its shell. While its shell is brittle enough to be shattered with a slight touch, Magcargo can reform its body by dipping itself into magma. It can be found in mountainous regions and has been living in volcanic craters for tens of thousands of years, and according to one folklore, when the wild Magcargo population suddenly increases, it's a sign that a volcano eruption is coming. Now we're going to rewind it a little bit because 10K Celsius does more than just evaporate water on contact. I mean, that is literally just, the temperature of magma to my knowledge. Though, it is very interesting to at least know that diamonds melt at 4,500 degrees Celsius. The internal body temperature of Magcargo is more than double that temperature. There is not a single thing on this planet that will not melt if it touched the inside of Magcargo. Do not take that out of context. Do not the Magcargo. Now, I am going to stray away from my normal formula, as I would normally end with Victory Road. But after looking at it and Mount Coronet, the more fitting finale would be the Sacred Mountain itself. So, let's allow Victory Road to be our semi-finale. Victory Road is the last and toughest of the challenges leading up to the Pokemon League. I'll be real, we honestly get no new interactions or Pokemon that have interactions besides getting to see 3 new Pokemon naturally occur: Azumarill, Gabite, and Lapras. Azumarill has highly developed hearing that allows it to hear distances even when it's underwater. By keeping still and listening closely, it can identify prey even in the wild, fast-moving rivers. If Azumarill spots a drowning Pokemon, it will make an air bubble that helps them breathe, or when Azurill are playing near the rivers. It lives in rivers and lakes and can live in the water all day long. Its diet is not changing from what it had before, which is primarily fish, so that's a nice and easy one. As for Gabite, which we can round out our known info since we already talked about Gible, Gabite is a fierce and predatory Pokemon known for its scales, which are believed to have medicinal properties and the ability to heal most illnesses, even those thought to be incurable. Scuba'd has short, extremely sharp teeth like its pre-evolved form Gibble. It has been known to move at extreme speeds. The protrusions on Scuba'd's head allows it to emit ultrasound waves, which can be used for navigating through pitch-dark caves. Scuba'd is also a very territorial creature and will fight back against enemies to protect its home. It is passionate about shiny objects such as gems, treasures, and even carbink, and it hoards a collection of them in its nest. When it sees Sableye trying to take carbink as food, Scuba'd jealously attacks the Sableye. Despite its aggressive demeanor, giving Scuba'd a sparkly item such as a glass bead can turn it docile. It predominantly lives in mountainous regions and can survive in both snowy and arid temperatures. Once again, another unchanged diet, and it's here where I get to say, once again, the thumbnail has two Pokemon that do not interact with each other whatsoever, as we will never, ever see Bidoof and a Garchomp naturally occurring in the same area unless it's an absolute fluke. Or unless you take Bidoof to go fight Cynthia. Have fun with that. But finally, another Pokemon that has existed since Generation 1, and we can finally talk about it as it finally naturally occurs. Lapras, who is a gentle, helpful Pokemon that enjoys ferrying people across bodies of water. In the past, its docility made it an easy target for hunters, and it was driven to near extinction. Recent protection efforts have seen Lapras become overabundant instead, which is now affecting the fish Pokemon numbers in some areas. An intelligent Pokemon, it can understand human speech. As seen in the Pokemon The Series episode, Viva las Lapras, Lapras has been known to travel in large pods across the seas, spanning both polar and tropical areas. To keep in touch with others of its kind, it sings enchanting melodies. Lapras will usually sing when it is in a good mood. Actually, I do the same. If I'm in a really good mood, I will sing. Also, if I play a horror game and start getting scared, I will start singing. In the episode Holiday High Jinx, it's shown that Lapras can develop psychic abilities such as telepathy. In Alola, they are used as a ride Pokemon called the Lapras Paddle. Alolan natives use Lapras to travel and fish for Pokemon in the water. I do find it funny that Lapras was going extinct, and then now that it's been brought back, there are fish populations that are suffering a bit as Lapras becomes dominant. And I mean, it is a strong Pokemon with seemingly ancient origins in nature and design, and with its size to boot, that makes it a very difficult Pokemon to topple in the food chain. It's almost like an invasive species, but it's not. And regarding this route, I do mean it. Many of our other Pokemon here we have discussed the interactions between already. To give you an idea, so you know I'm not just lying to you, in one of the more diverse rooms here, we find Golbat, Machoke, Graveler, Dugong, Azumarill, Steelix, Medicham, Floatzel, Gabite, Lapras, Magikarp, and Gyarados. They're competing for fish. Sure, you know, some of our Seals and our Azumarill and Floatzel might fight each other. To the victor goes the spoils, except Azumarill won't eat them. And honestly, if I look at Floatzel, it's probably not eating them either, unless they absolutely need to. Medicham and Steelix are keeping to themselves. No one's bothering them. Only Gyarados would dare mess with Lapras, but Lapras still might put it in its place. All while our bats drink blood, and can you guess what Machoke and Graveler do? The same thing they always do, train and eat rocks. Do you see why it feels so wrong for the first time to make Victory Road the finale? It's too clean cut, it's too easy. I need power, interaction, intrigue, and so let's move on to Mount Coronet as our finale. We're in the finale, and oh boy, is it a big one, as we have reached Mount Coronet. If you've made it this far, thank you so much for watching and supporting. I appreciate it. And let's round this out. Mount Coronet is a sacred mountain that is capped the year round with snow. A gigantic maze sprawls inside of it. There is an ancient ruin named the Spear Pillar located here. Bear with me as we will burn through descriptions of Pokemon included here and then paint a picture at the very end. The Pokemon levels also range from 14 all the way through the 50s, so we will start with less and end on the higher side of Pokemon, meaning we will leave out Gyarados and Whiscash for now. There are a lot of unique Pokemon here, and even painting something cohesive out of this may prove to be a challenge that I am very ready for. And so, let's start with Southern 1F, the Orberg City to Heart Home City side. Most Pokemon here are found at all times. There is are some exceptions though, as Zubat might leave at night. Here we find said Zubat, Golbat, Machop, Geodude, Nosepass, which does eat other rock, ground, or steel types for minerals to build up its own magnetic energy. In addition, there's Meditite, Chingling, Bronzor, and Magikarp. Though now we get to see not only Clefairy, but also Cleffa, which is in high numbers during the day, but drops significantly at night. And while we know the line is herbivorous or surviving purely on water and moonlight, let's talk about the little star-shaped Pokemon. Cleffa lives in mountainous regions typically found at meteor impact sites. Sightings of Cleffa become more likely during nights illuminated by shooting stars, where they dance the night away. This dance is said to bring good fortune to any who witness it. They quench their thirst the next morning by drinking dew. It is fascinated by anything resembling stars and meteors, such as Meteor. Because of this, as well as its own star-shaped silhouette, Cleffa is commonly believed to have arrived on a shooting star. The Pokemon this series episode, Clefairy Tales, showed that its evolved forms, and therefore Cleffa itself, are actually extraterrestrial Pokemon. As mentioned in Pokemon Sleep, Cleffa is known to sway its body similar to a rocking cradle while sleeping. The way it moves while sleeping resembles a twinkling star in the night. I might need to cover all extraterrestrial Pokemon one day, but moving on. Northern First Floor Room 1, Eterna City to Celestic Town side. There are no Clefairy here and no water to reside in, so no fishies, otherwise it is exactly the same. Basement 1F, Feebas Lake. We double the wild Pokemon's levels as they are now in the early 30s, which I am stating for posterity's sake. Clefairy is back. Alongside it, we have Golbat, Machoke, Graveler, Nosepass, Meditite, Chingling, and Bronzor. The water is also back with Magikarp as we add in both Barboach and the other bottom feeder, Feebas, as this is the only place in which it can be caught in 4 random squares in the water. They really wanted to make it incredibly difficult to actually get Melodic, making it super elusive, but there's also no Melodic naturally found in this generation. Next area. Northern First Floor Room 2, Snow Point side. Same Pokemon as before, same levels, except no water Pokemon. Second floor, replace Meditite with Medicham and then throw in Bronzong to make up a fifth of the population here. When angered, Bronzong lets out a warning cry that rings out like the tolling of a bell. It can summon rain clouds, which earned it the nickname Bringer of Plentiful Harvests, and led to some referring to it as a deity since ancient times. Bronzong's cry is also believed to have the power to open a hole leading to other worlds. Many scientists believe that Bronzong found in Galar originated from a different region after researching the patterns on its body. Some Bronzong can sleep up to 2,000 years, with one such case leading to quite the media story when one was discovered at a construction site. Bronzong typically lives in ruins and mountain ranges, and once again, it eats nothing, though Bronzor may be eaten by the right Pokemon such as Nosepass, eventually resulting in this evolution occurring. Third floor, same group once again. We kind of seem to just change every other floor, though the Medicham numbers are increasing very minutely while Golbat decreases. Like, I think it was literally 1% difference. Fourth floor, room 1, adding in Machoke and booting out their dinner plate Bronzor. We are also reaching level 40 and have the water back. Above the water is where the Zubat and Golbat have moved to. Meanwhile, in the water, I'm gonna break the rules because I can, and we are getting Magikarp, Gyarados, Barboach, Whiscash, Dratini, and Dragonair. Now, we know Dratini is a bottom feeder, but Dragonair may state something new. Dragonair emits a gentle aura that gives it a mystical appearance. As seen in Pikachu's rescue adventure, it can make its wings grow larger in order to fly, but otherwise moves through the air unaided. Dragonair hosts a large amount of energy within its body, which it can discharge through the crystals on its neck and tail. This causes its body to brighten and give off a different aura that changes the weather in its vicinity. As a result, Dragonair has been referred to as a divine Pokemon since ancient times by agricultural peoples. Very interesting that we have Bronzong and Dragonair only really appearing here, both being very important to agriculture in the past. Dragonair is a rare Pokemon that inhabits pristine seas and lakes. The lakes Dragonair lives in are usually filled with offerings from people in gratitude. It is said that a person who sees a Dragonair at the start of a year will be healthy for a whole year. As mentioned in Pokemon Sleep, it is known to channel power and change the weather even when it sleeps. So while its diet has not been stated to be any different, it also doesn't mention that it is a bottom feeder here. Instead, much like some insects in the final stage of their own lives, Dragonair may actually be completely thriving off of the immense energy that it has stored away and doesn't need to eat currently, which I'm just going to accept and move on with, because Dragonite, while not here, also has a whole other thing going on. 4th floor, room 2. No water, otherwise it's the same Pokemon. 4th floor, room 3. Nose passes back. Bronzor is gone again. And in a small population, we actually add in Chimecho, a yellow globular growth, referred to as a suction cup or a sucker. It's connected to the top of its body. Chimecho can create ultrasonic sound waves and other noises. It uses 7 different echoing cries to communicate with others. It is nocturnal and usually lives in grasslands and woods, but some are found in mountainous regions. An omnivorous species, it eats berries that it plucks with its tail and can knock out large prey using powerful waves of air, which are thought to be created by Chimecho amplifying the faint sound of wind inside its body. Watch out, Golbat, you have a new predator. 5th floor and 6th floor, same Pokemon. The tunnel room does actually drop Chimecho, and then there's the mountainside. Clefairy, Golbat, Machoke, Noctowl, Nosepass, Medicham, the herbivorous and root-eating Absol, since it does not like fighting and has that wonderful horn, perfect for doing such things, Chingling, Bronzong, Snover, and the final new Pokemon, Abomasnow. Abomasnow lives in snowy mountains and appears only when snowy flowers bloom. I immediately started smiling because the way I said Abomasnow, just you know the meme. I don't need to explain it. Once the flowers die, it retreats to isolated areas because Abomasnow prefers to be alone and not associate with others. It's a neat. It is able to create blizzards to hide itself. It can also cause whiteout conditions with just a shake of its massive body. Abomasnow is also known as the Ice Monster and Abominable Snowman. It protects Snover from packs of Galarian Darumaka who chase them for the berries they grow by swinging its arms like hammers. Side note, I need Monsters Inc., but instead it's Pokemon. It's nothing but Pokemon. The movie is exactly the same, and when they show the Abominable Snowman, the Himalayas! It's just Abomasnow. It's just Abomasnow. I don't figure out the rest. I don't know. Abomasnow is powerful enough to split huge boulders in two. As mentioned in the Sleep Style Dex, a sleeping Abomasnow can still cause blizzards by occasionally swinging its arms. Researchers acknowledge that it is unknown why it does this, though it is theorized that it is either a habit to hide itself or just sleepy flailing. So basically, it's protecting itself even while asleep. Now, I mean, it is a plant and doesn't have a diet change from Snover, so it is simply a sun-praising autotroph, of course. And so, allow me to paint you one final picture of Sinnoh. Mount Coronet, the largest mountain in all of Sinnoh, sacred, and the land closest to the heavens themselves as the point crashes through the clouds themselves and threatens space itself. It serves as the home of many Pokemon, one of which being a Pokemon that we will follow on its journey through and up the mountain, Clefairy. As Clefairy bounces and bounds up through the caves and rooms of Mount Coronet, it takes a sip of water from puddles or small bodies of water along the way to nourish itself on its journey to the top. Clefairy deftly avoids any Zubat coming after it, making the blue bats have to seek other Pokemon to drain the blood of, such as the much easier to tackle Machop, who actively train in these caves and don't avoid a challenge. Though while one Zubat distracts the Machop, a swarm of others will attempt to eat their fill of blood. In other times, that same Machop will keep its distance and simply train with a Geodude who stick to themselves. As Clefairy continues up, it does pass by some Cleffa that move about on these lower levels. Despite the sheer number of Pokemon, it is much safer here for the baby, as there are other strong Clefairy that can help care for it as part of their communal lifestyle, even help them reach the top. Bounding forward, Clefairy notices a Nosepass slowly using its magnetic abilities to draw in a sleeping Geodude for its next meal. Upwards we continue. Metatite are meditating or possibly even training with Machop. Bronzor listfully float by, and then a rogue Chingling will release a sonic cry that disrupts the cave. The Chingling watches the ceiling for the sudden drop of a Zubat, overwhelmed by the harsh noise, and goes for the kill as it chomps down, devouring the bat bit by bit, no different than a Pac-Man. In the water, at least the Magikarp have nothing to worry about, other than the occasional burst of destruction from the other Pokemon. We depart from this Clefairy for but a moment, which we will endearingly nickname Starfruit and drop to Feebas Lake for now. Here, the Machop have trained enough alongside the Geodude for them both to evolve respectively into Machoke and Graveler. This makes getting a meal much tougher for Zubat, and so we only find Golbat down here. Meanwhile, in the water, the sediment has built up from water trickling down from the upper levels. That water leaching the rock and minerals, making it cloudy as it all brings about a murkier water in this area, providing mud that is perfect for a Pokemon such as Barboach to layer the ground under the water, the sediment. Said water is incredibly unfit for most Pokemon, though there is one other bottom feeder here found on this bottom floor as we see Feebas floating about waiting for its day to evolve, for its scales to start changing into its rainbow color. We catch back up with Starfruit as it has gone up a few levels. Despite going up higher, it is actually colder now. We find Machoke braving the cold and bracing themselves as they take the brute force impact of Graveler rolling at it. As they continue to train, it repays the Graveler in hefty moss-covered rocks that they find. These same Graveler have little to no issue regarding the few Nosepass as they can withstand the magnetic monster. Instead, the Nosepass focus on finding where the magnetic field is at its strongest in hopes of evolving. On the rare occasion, a Medicham may be found training alongside other Pokemon, though it is more likely to be found meditating near the entrances where it is colder, sometimes braving it further by stepping ever further upwards. Starfruit encounters some difficulty though, as the Golbat here are much stronger, but a well-appointed metronome catches not only the Golbat off guard, but also attracts the attention of a group of Chingling designed to take down Golbat with enough power as a team. Though their ringing is amplified further, as we not only find Bronzor here, but also Bronzong within these caves that already amplify the sound. Bells ringing in response to the shrieks of Chingling, bringing about a new headache to the Pokemon in the area and serving a challenge to residents within the cave. Luckily, the Metal Plate and Bell do not hunt down other Pokemon and coexist peacefully until confronted, letting Bronzor and Bronzong just do as they please. Bounding through the floors, Starfruit has encountered far more than it was ready for, and the climb itself is already so difficult. So it's time to refuel by the waters in the 4th floor, as our dear Clefairy sits by the water's edge and takes healthy gulps of water, and notices Magikarp and Barboach come up to it. They find the food between the debris washed off by Starfruit and eat it. On the rare occasion, a confident Dratini may swim upwards from the floor and they might make quick friends. Otherwise, these waters have more action occurring out of sight of landlubbers, because the Barboach will not hesitate to eat other fish as necessary. They aren't just bottom feeders. They take their meal of Magikarp, though anytime they get too close to Dratini, they are met with a harsh dragon tail. The Barboach, having either lived long enough or been smacked enough by Dratini, evolves into the all-devouring Whiscash. It opens wide and swallows other Pokemon whole until they've had enough of Whiscash's reign of terror, resulting in both Dragonair and Gyarados. This results in Gyarados devouring any fish it may come across and turns the underwater ecosystem on its head, forcing Whiscash to take its primary preferred position hidden in the muck of the waterbed. Meanwhile, Dragonair are powerful enough to avoid detection or fight back when necessary, making them partially removed from the cycle here. Rising even further, Starfruit is nearly at the peak. It has avoided the clutches of Golbat, sipped plenty of water, and gotten massive thunder thighs from climbing up on this track. There are less Machoke, as groups of Medicham have taken their place, meditating along the walls, striking down Golbat, and stealing their own wills against the sounds that not only the Chingling make, but also Chimecho, as the Golbat were getting the upper hand when they corner singular Chingling, only to result in Chimecho being brought into existence and to not only split the ears of Golbat, but also derail their supersonic abilities and even wrap their tails around the bats after incapacitation to seal their fate before they eat them. It is best to simply stay far away from all of that commotion. After much of the same continual fears and worries, Starfruit, our Clefairy, exits out to the mountainside one last time. We stare out at a mostly peaceful, snow-laden world. Machoke are exercising in the cold with each other. Nosepass are slowly buried by snowfall. Metachamp continue to meditate, and the Chingling group up to hunt down the rare Golbat and Noctowl. The lives of Pokemon here are partially supported by the happy little Snover that push apart deep snow and dig their roots deep in the ground in order to draw their necessary water. On occasion, if a polite Pokemon wishes for a berry, Snover will give it freely. Though, if hassled, then Abomasnow will always be nearby, prepared to bring down an avalanche upon the offender, bringing about a blizzard that will create whiteout conditions and seal the fate of many Pokemon here. And this is where our warning system comes in. For here we find Bronzong and Absol, waiting for more than an avalanche as Absol scrapes through the snow for roots, actually avoiding conflict with the Snoverline due to its own disdain for fighting. As Starfruit climbs the mountainside, it reaches the top, where it can finally dance and sing amongst its kind. Though, while it gets there, we hear the howls of Absol and the ringing of Bronzong as the sky darkens. A disaster is about to take place, until the many Pokemon at the summit of Mount Coronet hide away in reverence and fear of the gods about to bestow their presence upon the world, as Dialga and Palkia have been summoned. Prepare yourselves for a battle between time and space that may rip apart reality itself. That concludes the Sinnoh Ecosystem. Hopefully that final picture was satisfactory. It was about as difficult as I expected and a bit harder to really bring to life compared to previous ones. But hey, Univers should be easier, and there's a lot more new Pokemon to talk about with that. It's almost like they created a whole Pokedex of new Pokemon for that game. The next video I'm going to be working on is actually going to be explaining every single ability that Pokemon has, both the mechanics and the lore, or the science behind them. But with that, thank you so much for watching. Again, if you love this, if you enjoyed this, subscribe, share this with other people. Go the extra mile and become a member for as little as $3 a month, as it makes a massive difference and helps the channel out more than I can describe. And that is what all of these people did as well. These people are members, and I thank you, as you get to be part of the credits and you get a couple of other benefits as well. So again, your support goes a long way in any form that you are able to show it, and I appreciate it more than I can express. And as always, thank you so much for watching. Don't do anything I want to do. Don't do anything I want to do. Please be nice to each other. I love you, and I'll see you next time. Bye!